All right, welcome everyone. I now call the June 23rd, 2020 City Council meeting to order for Bothell. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings was again extended until July 1st. Therefore, this meeting will be held entirely remotely. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Sign-up sheets were provided by the city clerk's office via links in the agenda. The video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone and listen live to the meeting. If you have called in, we ask that you mute your device so as not to interfere with the meeting. If a participant fails to mute their connection and causes a disruption to the meeting, the connection will be terminated. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referring to so everyone can follow along. Those who provided advance notice are able to make comments under the visitor comment portion of the meeting. So at this point, we'll take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position on the phone call. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Deputy Mayor Zorns,
Here.
Councilmember Thompson,
Here.
Councilmember McAuliffe, Councilmember McAuliffe,
Here.
Councilmember McNeil,
Here.
Mayor Olson,
Here.
Councilmember Dorr, Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
And I believe Councilmember Dorr has some technical difficulties, but she should be joining us shortly.
All right, thank you. So in addition, the following city staff are in attendance: City Manager Jennifer Phillips, City Clerk Laura Hathaway, City Attorney Paul Byrne, Finance Director Chris Bothell, Human Resources Director Matthew Pruitt, Information Services Director Joe Sherman. So lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. So for all the meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphones when not speaking. You are also streaming the live video. Please turn down the sound off, or please turn off the sound as there is a delay. So for our council members, if you want to speak, please indicate this by holding up the yellow cards in the lower portion of your screen. I'll call on you as I see them. This will help you avoid a problem of two people speaking at the same time. Remember, please mute your microphone when not speaking. Oh, and we have Councilmember Dorr. Welcome. All right, because this is a special meeting, the agenda cannot be amended to include any new items. If there are any topics council wishes to add to the agenda, please raise your card so that we can add them to the agenda on Thursday. Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. This past week, we've received a bunch of calls from several members of our community regarding the Main Street closure area. I'd like to see if we could bring that back on Thursday to have a more robust discussion on it.
Yeah, if I can see a nod of council members. Seeing, yep, definitely a majority. So, all right, city manager, if we can bring those back on Thursday as an agenda item. All right, seeing nothing else. All right, so I'd like to take a moment, a point of personal privilege, and just make a statement. So with the start of these budget workshops as mayor, I'd like to say a few words. First and foremost, a budget reflects the values of the city. One value our city has recently conveyed in the November 2018 elections was the desire to have high level of service from police and fire. When residents have an emergent situation, our residents want to be able to call and have someone come to their assistance. The killing of George Floyd has brought a topic into the spotlight that I think we should discuss in the city of Bothell. Are we using our police force in the best possible way? So I'd like to say we have an excellent police department, and it has been through consistent training and the desire to improve that we have the staff that we do. I think it's important to ask how we can do better. So I would like to ask the chief and the city manager, along with their staff, to dive into that question. Are there roles in our community filled by our police officers that may be better suited for other individuals, allowing the officers to focus on the enforcement of our laws where their training suits them best? So this is a tough question. I certainly don't have the answers, yet I believe our staff with community outreach can find these opportunities. So starting today, we'll be discussing the city's budget for the next 3 evenings, but I also want to take another moment to talk about the topic of race, equality, and systemic racism. So there are conversations happening throughout the country, and I think we need these conversations happening in our city. They are, but I think we should continue them. For this is an uncomfortable subject, especially for me. It's because it doesn't come up in my day-to-day conversations, and I worry I'll say something improper or offensive. So back in the late 1930s, there was Mardi Gras fairs held in the summer where people would dress up like apes and walk down Main Street. A fake ordinance number 1 was written in 1939, making it unlawful for any ape to use the streets of Bothell. So both of these actions viewed in today's society would be viewed as racist, yet this is part of the history of Bothell, and it doesn't reflect of who we are today. The point I'm trying to make here is that this is a scary subject, but not talking about racism allows it to fester and grow in the shadows of society. We need to continually denounce it and fight it until it withers and dies for good. Thank you for that moment. Let me say that. So with that, City Clerk, we have a visitor comment, I believe.
Yes, thank you. We do. We had one written comment from Hannah Mendro, who wrote regarding the funding in the areas of police, arts, education, and housing. And that written comment will be attached to the agenda packet once we scan it in and available for public viewing. And then we also had one person who would like to call in today to give his comments. Mr. Mankey, are you on the phone?
I am. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are. So Mr. Mankey would like to speak, and you have 3 minutes. I'll set the timer.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. My name is Ben Mankey, and I live at 2920 213th Street Southeast. I have 2 budget-related comments for you this evening, one related to last week's quarterly financial update from Mr. Bothell, and the other relating to a revenue opportunity that I didn't see in the packet but wanted to bring up. In last week's financial update presentation, it was reported that Q3 financials were expected to stabilize. However, it was also mentioned that the second wave of COVID-19 was not factored into that projection, and that the finance director stated that he hopes it doesn't happen. I don't want to become known as the town crier of centuries past, and I'm not an economist, but I do take a long-term view of the future and keep an eye on the horizon as I go. My concern with last week's projection and statements are that failing to plan for a second wave is just inviting crisis. We're already seeing a resurgence of the virus in many southern states, and the University of Washington has recently released some modeling predictions showing that wave 2 is likely to strike Seattle in mid-September. With no vaccine in sight, current data suggests that we should reconsider our approach by factoring in a second wave of virus and subsequent shutdowns in our remaining biennial budget forecasting. On the lighter side, I've been digging through public records over the last few months and found an interesting revenue opportunity that I believe has been overlooked. The municipal court currently has $3 million in receivables outstanding from fines and fees that were ordered over the last 10 years. Per the municipal court, a majority of the individuals reside outside of our city. The city currently requires these individuals to pay in person at the court or to suffer a hefty 7% convenience fee to pay online or by phone. We also require them to pay fines in full or not at all. I believe that the convenience fee and the required pay in full are major detriments to collecting funds from residents and also especially from non-residents. If the city were to reduce or eliminate the 7% convenience fee and the payment in full requirement, and then actively pursue payment from the individuals owing money, I believe that we could easily pull in at least $1 million within a year's time, if not more. I'll leave both of those things to you for consideration as you begin your budget discussion tonight. And I want to thank you all again for the opportunity to speak and also for serving our city. Thank you very much.
All right, unmuting the microphone. So let's move on to the 2021-2022 budget workshop and department presentations. So I'll turn it over to our city manager, Jennifer Phillips.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just a very brief opening this evening. We have a long couple of 3 days, 3 evenings together, and appreciate the council's time and the community's time in discussing our very important budget and some of the challenges we have to face and make some very difficult decisions in the months ahead. Tonight, we're focusing specifically on the general fund. So as you know, we have several utility funds. We made the decision not to present those tonight. We will present those in the fall as really the challenges that we're facing and the policy direction that we need relate specifically to the general fund. So if you can keep that in mind as we're making the presentations, especially on Thursday, when Public Works will be presenting their budget. The budget information that we're sharing this evening is as high level as you can get. It's really just intended to show a very, very high level overview of what each department has estimated it would expend for 21-22, just to give a snapshot of where we are today. This is not intended to be a deep dive or get into the details of the budget at this time. This is really about a policy discussion and giving policy direction so that we can find ways to bridge this structural deficit that we have. We will discuss the budget in more detail in fall. The way that it's presented today is really, again, for policy discussion, and then we'll be bringing a budget that's closer to being balanced and with hopefully maybe balanced for further discussion. And if we do need further direction in fall, we could obtain that for the City Council for finalizing that budget. It's very important tonight, as we go through the next 3 nights, that Council look at your priorities and determine what your priorities are, as well as your goals, and to provide policy direction to me so that I can complete this budget. So that's really the focus of tonight. We hope through the department presentations that we're able to give you information to share what each department has budgeted for this first run. This is our first estimate at what it will cost to provide services for 21-22. Each department will be providing a very brief overview of what they do based on the fact that we're virtual. This is much harder to do virtually. We respect that. So we kept some things much shorter than we normally would do. So a very, very brief overview of what each department does. The most painful part that's brief is we're not able to share our list of accomplishments. So know that there's many, many more, but we just tried to pick a few to set the tone to say that we are accomplishing things and we've done a lot so far. And we just wanted to highlight a few of those. We did identify reductions that have been made in trying to reduce the expenditures for 21-22. And then there'll be a slide of opportunities. And that's really identifying things that each department head has identified that are needs within their department, or future opportunities, or things that we've heard from the council over the last year or two that they would be interested in within those departments. And that's the format for this evening. We're going to start out with an overview of the finances from our director of finance, Chris Bothell, and then I'll be doing a presentation with regards to the council goals and priorities. And then we'll be moving into the department budgets. We're hopeful that we can get through the internal service departments this evening and then go into the other departments on Wednesday and Thursday. But we're here and we'll take as much time as the council needs to be able to have a dialogue and a discussion with you so that you can understand what's in the department budgets, what things you might be interested in, and be able to give us policy direction. That policy direction will occur on July 7th. I figured by the end of 3 nights, all of us need the opportunity to absorb everything we've heard. It gives you 2 weeks to think about what you've talked about and provide that policy direction then at the July 7th council meeting. And that's the format for the next couple of evenings. So unless you have questions, I'd like to turn it over to Director Bothell.
All right. Good evening. I'm going to share a presentation. Okay, and because I'm sharing a presentation, I won't be able to see most of you. So if you have a question, please just unmute and interrupt me. You're welcome, of course, to ask questions at any time. I have a lot of information for you tonight, so I'm going to try and get through this relatively quickly. But if I need to slow down or you have questions, just let me know. So the presentation outline for tonight, I've got forecasts. I'm going to share with you the assumptions that we're using for revenue and expenditures in the 21-22 budget. I will tell you what the gap is, or what the funding gap, the operating deficit that we're projecting based on those assumptions is. And then I'll share with you some of the strategies that we are looking at to help bridge that gap. Following the forecasts, I will have a revenue capacity analysis, and this is just, I'm going to share with you the opportunities the city has to raise additional revenue. And there was a report in your packet that supports that presentation. Following that, I have a debt profile analysis presentation. This will just be, I'll be sharing the current debt profile for the city with you, and also letting you know how we stack up from a debt perspective with our neighbors. And then I'll end it with a fund balance projection, let you know kind of where we expect in terms of actual fund balance in the general fund, where we expect to start the 21-22 biennium. Which also addresses a question that Councilmember McCullough asked last week. So I'll get right into it, start with the forecast. So the revenue forecast, working assumptions. So we're calling these working assumptions because these are likely to change as we go through the budget process. As I've said before, we don't have a lot of data about what's currently going on or how that's going to impact the next couple of years. So we've made our best guesses, educated guesses based on what economists are talking about, what our expectations are. Sales tax being our largest general fund revenue is where I'm going to start. So for 2021, we're expecting a $1.5 million reduction compared to 2019. $1.5 million represents about 10% of sales tax collections in 2019. A lot of economists are projecting larger decreases, 15%, some even higher than that, for sales tax collections. I think Bothell is going to fare a little bit better than some, based on a couple factors. One being we don't have a lot of destination retail, so we don't have a big mall. We don't have new car dealerships that are generating a lot of sales tax from those sales. And those types of things lead me to believe that we're going to fare a little bit better. And that's generally been the case with Bothell too. In 2022, we are projecting sales tax revenue will be restored back to 2019 collections. Even when I say it, that sounds a little optimistic, but if I kind of back away from it and think that we go, that would basically be 4 years of stagnant sales tax collections, which seems a little bit more reasonable. I'll move on to property tax, which is our second largest general fund revenue. We're expecting a modest decrease in new construction value, modest being about 25 to 30% a year. The reason that isn't going down, that we aren't expecting that to decline more, is that just the timeline of projects and when they end up on the tax rolls. A lot of the projects that are going to end up on the tax rolls for 2021 and 2022 are already in process before the pandemic hit. So we'll see kind of a tapering off of that, and then we'll adjust as we get to the end of 2022, 2023, and see kind of what the new normal looks like, or what the impact of the current recession how that's going to affect property tax, new construction values. We're also working under the assumption that the city manager's proposal and that the city council will approve, that we take the 1% allowable annual increase in property tax. I have one little note here that we may need an additional resolution. The 1% limit isn't actually a 1% limit, it's the lower of inflation or 1%. So it's pretty likely that we're going to end up with an inflation number in 2020 that's less than 1%. You can still get the 1%, but we have to, just as a procedural matter, we have to pass a resolution of significant need, which based on our current budget situation, wouldn't be a problem. And then I wanted to address something, with the economic difficulties that are going on right now, it's affecting people's ability to pay their property taxes. isn't going to impact our revenues, because when it comes to property tax, we always get the property tax. It's just a matter of when. So we do expect that some of the payments will come in slowly, more slowly than we've seen in the past several years. But eventually we will get the money, and so it's primarily just a cash flow issue. We don't expect that to be a major issue that we have to deal with, but it is something we are watching. So continuing with the working assumptions, utility taxes, we're holding those at 2019 levels, or we're adding a small inflationary increase just based on the utility. For development fee revenue, we're expecting a significant reduction, and that's based on an analysis that was performed by the Community Development Department. They did a really thoughtful analysis of what they see in the pipeline and what they expect to see coming, and fed us some numbers that make a lot of sense, and so we've incorporated those into our current forecast or our current budget. And as you probably are aware, there are a number of other revenues in the general fund and elsewhere that are also being forecasted. They're not as big, so I won't touch on them tonight. But we are forecasting each one of them individually. We're using either a mix of inflation or industry forecasts to forecast those revenues as well. So I'm going to switch over to expenditures and talk about the assumptions there. For salaries, we're expecting that salaries will basically be frozen. We don't really have the ability to freeze salaries because most of our workers are represented by a labor union, but we expect that that inflation is going to be really small, and that will lead to effectively salaries that are frozen. We're expecting healthcare costs to increase by 8% and all other benefits to have no increase, and those expectations are in line with what our benefits provider is telling us. And then line item expenditures, we're expecting no increase there, and that's consistent with the directions from the city manager to departments when they were preparing their budget request or their budget estimate. And then one of the things you're going to hear a lot about tonight is when departments start talking, and over the next couple of nights, is about the cuts that they've offered that they think they could implement to save the city some money. The expectation that we have is that those savings that they've offered will actually materialize. So based on our assumptions, our preliminary operating deficit is $12.5 million for 21 and 22. That assumes that all services are fully funded at the current level. So we have identified some savings opportunities to help mitigate the $12.5 million problem. So I'll just walk you through these really quickly. One of the things that we have identified is asset replacements that are due in the 21-22 biennium. So a number of years ago, the city took the position that they would suspend the saving for asset replacements and just do what we call pay-as-you-go, which means that asset replacements that are due in the current biennium need to be funded with current revenue in the biennium. If we were to replace none of our assets in the current biennium, or as few as we possibly could, there's significant savings there. Additionally, the future asset replacement set aside, this is the money we would be putting aside every year to save for future replacements. If we just continue to forego that for another biennium, there's some savings there. The Human Services Grant Program was identified as an opportunity for savings. And then a phased unfreezing of vacant positions is another one. So as we were talking about our response to the COVID-19 revenue issue, we froze a bunch of positions that were vacant, right? Most positions that were vacant. So what we're looking at is if we were to unfreeze those in kind of a phased fashion, that there would be some savings that, basically unfreeze those into 21-22. There would be pretty significant savings that would result from that kind of phased unfreezing. And that's an opportunity that we're looking at as well. And then finally, contracting for specific services, and these have been talked about before, but to the extent that there's savings that have been identified by contracting for some of the services that we currently do, those are also being looked at.
Chris, can I interrupt a second? Sorry. The phased unfreezing of vacant positions, is that as opposed to now the COVID crisis is over and everything would be automatically frozen?
That's correct. So when we came up with the estimate, the first mock-up of the budget, we assumed that all positions would be unfrozen and filled as of January 1st.
Okay.
So if we delay filling some of those positions, we can identify that there's savings in there, and we can implement. That's where the savings comes from.
We just merge them in a little more individually as they're needed, and we can afford them.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the balancing strategy.
One more follow-up question on that. I'm sorry.
Do we know roughly what the total is if we left those positions frozen for the biennium? Do we know what the total savings we would realize is?
Sort of. I mean, it's kind of it's hard to imagine that we would leave all of them frozen because we have positions in there. We have public safety positions in there. We have some really critical positions that we might not be able to drag out. But the annual savings is about $2 million for the frozen positions currently. That's, yeah, don't hold me to that, please, because that's a really, but that's the rough order. Okay. So the balancing strategy for the biennium is to focus on balancing 2021. And this is really important. We currently adopt a 2-year budget, and we will be adopting a 2-year budget. It's great to, as a planning tool, the budget, it's great to look 2 years out into the future and plan that way. But in the current economic times where there's just so much uncertainty, it's really, really difficult to think about planning for revenues that are 2 years or 30 months away from now. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on balancing the 2021 budget, getting a budget that we can live with, and leaving ourselves some flexibility so that so that we can make a mid-biennial budget adjustment near the end of 2021 and adjust 2022 to reflect the current economic conditions at that time. And so you'll see there's kind of there's a real focus on 2021 right now. That's not at the expense of 2022. It's just there's so many unknowns and there's so much uncertainty out there right now that it's difficult to imagine what's going to happen in 2022. We're still making our best guess, but we're really focused on 2021. Another strategy is to advance goals with existing resources and recognize trade-offs. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. There isn't going to be any new revenue or any excess revenue to fund new and exciting things. So to the extent that we want to do new and exciting things, or we want to do something to pursue a goal of some sort, we're going to have to identify things that we either want to turn off so that we can turn the new things on, or reallocate resources from one program to this new thing we want to do. And so that's something that we're talking about, is how can we have a kind of have those resources evolve into something that meets a current need. And the last one is the Lot D. So you probably know that I think that the property is for sale and we're negotiating with potential buyers for that property. The proceeds of that sale would be speculative, and we can't include them in the budget at this point. So, but it is likely to come in this biennium. That'll be a significant amount of revenue or inflows. And so the proceeds for that are going to do some things. We're hoping that the proceeds of that will be available to do some things that we aren't otherwise going to be able to do, like rebuild fund balance and fund downtown cleanup, and potentially be a backfill for the City Hall lease payments if we need it. So that's the end of the forecasting piece. Are there any questions before I move on? Okay. So this is your revenue capacity analysis, and here I'm just going to share.
Hold on, we have a couple questions.
Sorry.
Councilmember Dewar.
Now can you hear me?
Yep.
So I had a question about sales tax. So do we have any indication of revenues that would that may have gone up with, for example, I've not been shopping where I would normally shop, Woodinville, Kirkland, because there are certain stores we don't have. So I've done a lot of online shopping, and it seems to me a lot of people are doing that. And so do we have any numbers to talk about how that may impact our sales tax revenue?
No, we don't have any numbers to support that, but I think it's a great point. When things are delivered to your home, obviously Bothell gets a sales tax, and if there are things you would traveled outside the city to purchase during normal times, then we've lost that sales tax. So I think it's a great point. We don't have any data on that yet. We will get sales tax numbers on April next month. My feeling is that, and so we do get data. We do have a window into. We can go to some of the big online retailers, and we could see kind of what the increases look like. If we can identify enough of them, we can share that information with you. If it's the big ones that everybody knows, and we can't identify enough online retailers that have that, we can't share that data because it's confidential information. But it is something we're keeping an eye on, and I think you're onto something. There's something there. We just don't know how big it is yet. I also think that good data about online, how much we're going to, how much we potentially might be getting from online sales that are now being delivered that people into Bothell that they may have traveled outside our city to get in the past or in normal times. I think that the really good data is probably going to come in May because I think there was a lot of shock from consumers in April about what was going on. And I think consumer confidence was way down. I don't know that it's rebounded in May, but I think May is going to have it would probably be a good basis for us to project what that looks like. So we'll keep an eye on that and we'll definitely report back to you all on that. I'm optimistic. I hope that there's something there. And I think that's a part of the piece. When I said that we're down, I'm projecting that we're going to be down a little bit less than kind of economists are predicting overall. That is a piece of it that we're watching, and that's a piece that we're trying to be thoughtful about as well, because you're spending more time at home. There's going to be more economic activity that's going to come to our city as a result of that. You're still muted.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Please.
My understanding is that not all online retailers are very specific when they report sales tax for an area. And some of them might be lazy and just put in a code for Seattle rather than Bothell. And is there a way to track that or make sure that we're collecting what we should be? I know we can't target every online merchandiser, but for the big ones, is there a way to track that to make sure that Bothell's code is in their system and being used for collection?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's recent legislation or a court case that caused online retailers to have to collect sales tax in Washington and a number of jurisdictions and a number of states, I should say, even if they don't have a presence here. I think that there's a fair amount of small online retailers with an out-of-state presence that wouldn't be using their correct location code and might be a little bit negligent in using the right location code to remit sales tax. But I would say with a lot of confidence that the large online retailers are using there's like 3 systems out there that you hook up to your back end, and they take the address that you're shipping your product to and they assign the location code to it. And since Bothell has its own location codes, we don't split zip codes and we don't split location codes. I have a pretty high degree of confidence that we're getting all the money that we should be from the large retailers. I do think that there might be some from some of the smaller ones that may be a little negligent. I will also say that the Department of Revenue, that's an area that they do audit when they go out and do their sales tax audits, location codes. And while we can't recapture, they'll only reallocate sales tax for 6 months after it's been collected to a different local jurisdiction. They are out there watching that and paying attention to those things. And they have a significant out-of-state audit presence, one of the biggest in the country. So they're out there auditing those online retailers and making sure they're using the correct location code as well. So I think it's a really good point. It's something that we definitely want to be thoughtful about. But I think in terms of actual dollars that aren't making it to Bothell, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Hey, Chris, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Could utility taxes, with more people working at home, could we see a little bump on utility taxes? Are they, based on usage, the more you flush your toilet, that kind of thing?
Yeah,
We won't see a bump in that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that any gains that we have in residential, though, I think are probably going to be offset with losses in commercial. So I think that there's, a lot of the buildings, a lot of our business parks and stuff are pretty quiet right now. And I think that some of those gains will be offset. It's certainly something we'll be keeping an eye on. The one thing that I didn't mention that I probably should have is that 2020 is just going to be an anomaly. It's just going to be a weird year. It's probably not going to be, we're not going to really be able to use it to predict anything unless we end up with another pandemic. So it's going to be weird, but we're definitely keeping an eye on those things too. And we'll definitely, if the trend is to do more work from home and that starts to impact utility tax collections, that's definitely something we'll alert the council to.
Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. You had mentioned healthcare premiums increasing 8%. Is that already determined, or is there room for negotiation?
Well, so our benefits come from the AWC, the Association of Washington Cities is effectively the provider for us. We don't we would have to go out into the market and get benefits from another provider if we were going to negotiate. The increases are not final. They have a board that needs to vote on the increases. These are just the numbers that they think are coming from based on the big companies that provide. So they buy through the big networks, right? So Regents and Kaiser. And these are the numbers that are coming from them or what they expect to come from them. So as it currently sits, we could try to influence the board somehow. I'm not aware that we've ever tried to do that. But cities have gone outside of AWC and done their own work to get benefits, and then they have the opportunity to negotiate. But at this point, and I can check in with the HR director and see what he knows about that. But I'm not aware that we have any ability to negotiate those.
Okay, thank you. I asked that question because I know that, many cities are insured that way. So it might be worth us all kind of maybe writing a letter to them to see if, we're all kind of pitching in a little bit. Maybe AWC can help the municipalities as well with some of those increases.
It's a great point. I'll make a note and I'll talk to the HR director about that and see if there's something we can do there.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Boswell, I was curious about asset replacement. Like you sort of went over that as a general thing, but I'd be interested in looking at what assets that we do need to replace, or else there will be a significant added cost down the road, and potentially what we could get away with pushing off for a few years. I mean, it's just kicking the can down the road, but we need to kick some part of the can down the road sometimes. So if we could break those out at some point in time and separate them, I would like that.
Okay. Yeah, we do keep a detailed accounting of the assets that are scheduled to be replaced, and then when we don't replace them, they don't go away, right? So, and sometimes the maintenance costs become, make it not a great financial decision to defer those. We have a very pragmatic fleet manager who's paying attention to all those factors as well when we make those decisions about what to defer and what to actually fund in the current biennium. So it's a great point, and we'll be keeping an eye on that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
If I may, that will be coming as part of the detail for council in the fall.
Great. Thank you.
I'm hearing silence, so I'm going to move on. If questions pop up in your mind, just interrupt me and let me know. So the revenue capacity analysis, I'm just going to share with you opportunities that we have to increase revenues. The primary focus of this is ongoing general fund revenues or on just ongoing operating kind of revenues. So just to organize this, I've got it organized into two primary types of opportunities. The first one is councilmanic. These are opportunities that the council could vote to implement and do not require a vote of the people. And then the second type, obviously, are the ones that require a vote of the people. So I'm going to start with councilmanic opportunities. The first ones are two that are affecting businesses. So the first one is a revenue generating business license. So I came to you several months ago before COVID-19 was a relevant topic and said that we were going to do some outreach to the business community and talk about changing our business licensing structure. And that was based on the fact that the state has some legislation that that is forcing us to change our business licensing structure so we can go on one of their online platforms. So we did some research at that time, and we've done some follow-up research to see what's available, what methods would work. There's only a couple that the Department of Revenue supports. One is a head tax or an employee hours tax, which is also really popular with some of our neighbors. We've got Linwood, Kirkland, and Redmond all do it. If we were to move to an employee hours or head tax, and we set our rates similar to, in the range of where those three cities are, and they're all in a really tight grouping, we would generate an additional $2 million business licensing revenue. So that's a significant opportunity for us. The other one that affects business is the local B&O tax. And I probably don't need to say a whole lot about what this is. I will say, though, that we don't get great data on all of the economic activity that would be taxable within Bothell. What we get, we have good data on sales tax, but we don't know how much professional service would be taxable in our city, how much wholesale, how much retail would be taxable in our city. So revenue estimates are really difficult. We could do a study and kind of try and come up with a really good estimate. But at this point, based on retail sales, the data we get out of retail sales, we're assuming that we could get at least $3 million out of a local B&O tax. It's important to note that a local B&O tax program takes a lot of administrative resources to give taxpayers guidance, to process tax returns, to mail tax returns, all those good things. And so that it wouldn't be, it's not a low cost endeavor, but certainly there's some revenue there if that was something we were going to pursue. So the second councilmanic opportunity I have for you is utility taxes. So I'm going to start by saying there's two utility taxes are not all listed here. You'll see some in the voted slides too. State law prohibits us from going over certain limits for certain utilities. And those are going to show up in your without a vote. So those are going to show up on the voted slide. The four that are councilmanic or that the council could opt to increase are cable, storm, water, and sewer. And we've created some revenue estimates just based on a 2% increase. So if the utility tax was currently set at 6%, if we bump that to 8%, what would that mean? That's what these numbers are based on. So you can see the numbers to the right there for these four. It's only sort of important to note that cable can't be an outlier. They have a really good lobby, and you can't tax them. You can't put a utility tax on cable that is significantly different than the taxes you're putting on any of the other utility taxes. So we couldn't decide that we were going to go do cable at 12% and leave the rest of them at 6%. It's a weird little thing. So if we pursue this, I'll give you more information on that. But effectively, it can't be an outlier, but otherwise it's councilmanic. And the last two councilmanic opportunities are very, very small, but I think they're worth mentioning. There's a commercial parking tax and an admissions tax. The commercial parking tax is a tax on commercial parking businesses. I don't think we have a lot of this activity going on in the city, so I think it's a relatively minor opportunity, but it is out there. And then admissions tax is on things like dance clubs and concerts and movies. Again, we don't have a lot of these types of venues, and so I think it's a relatively small opportunity.
Chris, quick question.
Yes.
Because we have the North Shore Performing Arts Center, their tickets would be subject to that. What about schools that charge for their events? Those we can't tax those, can we?
Correct. No, you're right. We can't.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So I'll move on to voted opportunities. There's two sales taxes that the public could vote on. You can use them for specific purposes. The first one is public safety sales tax. It's a 0.1% sales tax that if the public voted on it and approved it, it would generate approximately $1.5 million per year. The proceeds of that opportunity would need to be used on public safety. The other one is transportation benefit district sales tax. This is a 0.2% sales tax. Also requires a vote of the people. This opportunity would generate about $3 million a year. And again, this would have to be, the proceeds of that would have to be used for transportation purposes. The purposes need to be consistent with the Transportation Benefit District's funding plan. We have a Transportation Benefit District that we've established, but we've never imposed a car license tab fee or a sales tax on it. So some of the infrastructure is built to impose that, but we just have not. And it would need to be voted on.
Councilmember Dewar.
Here, regarding the Transportation Benefit District, isn't that part of the I-976 lawsuit and
yeah, only the car tab part of it.
Only the okay. So yeah. The other part of it would generate, I assume, less than 3 million, or is 3 million the part that's not the car tab?
Right. This would be a sales tax. So the car tab. The car tab piece of it is the piece that's tied up with I-976. And there's a real question about whether or not that's a viable opportunity. So I didn't include it on the slides. It's probably not at this point. And that would be the per tab fee. The councilmanic per tab fee is up to $40. And then you can vote. You can go to the people and vote for up to $100 car tab fee. But I didn't recommend it simply because it looks like that's at this point, we don't know if it's viable. We could try to impose it, but and they're still TBDs, transportation benefit districts right now are still collecting the revenue from that because the state doesn't know what to do with it because there's a lot of legal action occurring around that. So, but this is a separate thing, and this one will live on. It's the nature of the car tab fee that is kind of in peril right now. The sales tax that's available to transportation benefit districts is not in question right now.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
So this is the other half of the voted opportunities for utility taxes. So same methodology to calculate these values. We have telephone, electricity, and natural gas. Each one of these the public would have to vote on them. And the 2% increase is based on if we currently had a rate of 6% and took it to 8%. That's what these values are based on. And then the final opportunity, the final voted opportunity is a property tax lid lift for any purpose described to voters. So you can do we could run a property tax lid lift for any purpose we want. You could say it was for maintenance operations. You could say it was for budget stabilization, anything you describe to voters, but voters would need to approve it. And then, obviously we would need to assign a dollar value to it. And so that's an opportunity that's out there. It's more broad. I don't have a lot of specifics on it because it's a really broad, there's a lot of opportunities here. And if it was something the council wanted to pursue or wanted more information on, I could prepare that. But there's just a lot of details in this one. Any other questions before I go to debt?
Councilmember.
Sorry, I had to unmute there. I just had a couple questions about the B&O tax. You mentioned the cities that are close to us that do a head tax. What cities close to us currently do a B&O tax?
Oh, that's a great question. Bellevue, Seattle, Lake Forest Park, Shoreline launched one in the last 5 years. Everett's got one. There's.
So it's reasonably common in the area?
Oh yeah, very common.
Okay. One other question that I had is, we're in a terrible position where there's nowhere good to raise or cut right now. Is there a way that we could phase something like that in? So we can say, we don't want to add a cost to people in the middle of this. However, if we're forecasting sales tax revenues to come back by the second half of this biennium, can we start it then?
Yeah, is your question specifically related to a B&O tax?
Yes.
Yeah, B&O taxes in that respect, they're great. There's a lot of local control. A lot of local jurisdictions have fought really hard to maintain local control over local B&O taxes. So you can play with the rate. There is the state statute sets up a limit. It's a 0.2% like upper limit, but the lower limit you could set wherever you want. You could move that around. It might be a bit of a, businesses probably aren't going to love it if we're moving it all the time. But you have all the control in the world to do that.
And one other question about that, is there a way that we can have different B&O tax rates or charge a different amount for smaller businesses versus larger businesses?
Usually that's accomplished with a threshold. So
okay.
Yeah, usually like a lot of, I think Shoreline, Kent launched one recently. I think that their thresholds are $500,000. Bellevue's is like 100 or 200,000. So yeah, thresholds usually the way that's done. A graduated rate is possible. I don't know of anybody who's doing that though.
Okay. Are there any assumptions that we use on how much business something like either that or a head tax would deter?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any data that would help us to understand. Certainly in the context of businesses relocating to your city, it's a factor that they're going to consider.
Yeah.
So not having a B&O tax makes you more attractive.
Thank you. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. One more question. You mentioned that cable can't be considered an outlier. Does that mean they have to be exactly the same, or is there some range that's not considered an outlier, but we could bump it by a little bit?
So it's not well defined. It would probably be a good question for legal. There may be some case law that would support, what a reasonable kind of range is, or where there would be some play in that number. I'm not super well versed in it. I just know that there is a federal law that prohibits us from having them be an outlier effectively. If cable was something that we wanted to pursue, we could definitely get you more information on that.
I'd like to know that, because when we look at utilities, like I'm not particularly in the mood to raise costs on basic services like water and sewer. Cable is pretty discretionary. And if there's a potential to help bridge our budget gap there, I'm interested in that. it's a, enough to make any kind of a difference.
Great. I made a note. We'll follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. So I had a question. Wanted to go back. Is sports fields an asset?
Yeah.
Okay, replacement. So that would be included in that cost.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. In talking about the utilities, you had a councilmatic, a potential increase of 2% going from 6 to 8, and then you had a voted on one. Those are different utilities, is that correct?
Yes. The utilities here are telephone. So these are the voted opportunities. It's telephone, electricity, and gas. The other four councilmanic were cable, storm, water, and sewer.
Okay, so in the cable, storm, water, and sewer would be councilmatic. So that would be increasing the generalized utilities, the basic household utilities. And then voted on would be the community voting on if they want to increase telephone, electric, and natural gas. When you say cable, where does cable fall in here?
Cable's in the councilmanic.
Okay. And is cable also include internet?
No, we can't tax internet. The Internet
Okay.
Tax Freedom Act, there's federal legislation that won't allow us to tax internet.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to make sure I clarified that because we definitely don't want to be taking away or taxing things that are definitely a necessity for accessibility. So, okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay, it got quiet, so I'm going to move on to debt. This part of the presentation is just, I want to share with you what our current debt load looks like, and then I've got a slide there where we compare it to our neighbors. So there's the municipal debt is generally classified based on two attributes. The first attribute is it general obligation or revenue debt? General obligation debt is debt that where the local government has pledged the full faith and credit of the government to repay that debt. Revenue debt is debt that is where we're pledging where the local government will be pledging a specific revenue source. It's commonly used by utilities, and we say, oh, we're going to the utility charges from users is what we're going to pledge to repay this debt. I'm going to focus on general obligation debt because usually, so all Bothell's debt, the revenue debt that we have is associated with the utilities. And so it's kind of outside of the general fund, and we aren't even backstopping it with general fund. So I'm going to focus on general obligation debt. And then also voted or non-voted, this just means, did it go to a vote of the people or was it effectively councilmanic debt? So this is just a table of Bothell's geo debt. And if you can't see it, I'll read you what's on there. We've got a bunch of debt issuances. The total principal balance outstanding is over $106 million. The remaining interest to maturity is over $48 million. So on our outstanding debt, we've got over $150 million of payments that we need to make. I think the thing that's most interesting or I want to draw your attention to is the maturity date column. None of our significant debt matures in the next 10 years. So we're looking at, like, I think years 13 to 19 where our significant debt matures. So our current debt load is not something that is, we're stuck with it for a while. For better, for worse, that's what we have for right now. So I'm going to show you how that stacks up to some of our neighbors. So we've got kind of similarly situated cities, Redmond, Shoreline, Linwood, Kirkland, Kenmore, and Mill Creek. So neighboring cities, most of them are kind of around our size. And then I've listed in the second column the geo debt at the beginning of this year by jurisdiction. You can see Bothell's up there with $106 million. The next closest is Redmond with $48 million. The population column is only there so that you can get an idea of what the relative size of the jurisdiction is. But then the per capita debt load in the last column is really telling. Bothell's almost $2,300 per capita. The next closest with Redmond is $737. I didn't calculate the average, but I'm saying it. I'm pretty comfortable saying it's in the $500 range. So our debt load per capita and our overall debt load is significantly higher than most of our neighbors, which is just another piece of our financial puzzle that we kind of have to deal with.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we go back one more slide?
Yes.
Because this is obviously very troubling, and breathtaking. Can you go over what the years were that these debts were incurred? Because the first two have them and the last four don't. Do we know the dates? Because
Yeah. So, so yeah, the first two, so that's just in the title of the debt. That's why it's there. I should have probably put a column in there. I thought maturity was more important, but you're right. When these happen is important as well. So obviously 2013 B bond, this was a debt that was associated with buying the North Shore School District properties in 2013. 2014 lift bond, this was, had to do with the crossroads, so the straightening of 522. I don't know what the Public Works Trust Fund loan was used for, that $5 million, but that's a 2011 debt. The public safety, this is the first for rebuilding the fire station. So this is the debt we issued last year to get the $25.5 million. And then just keep in mind that we've got another $10 million that we're going to need to issue to finish those projects as well. The next one is relatively small. It looks like that was a 2007 debt. The City Hall lease revenue bonds. So this is obviously City Hall 2015.
so one more question. Are any of these bonds able to be refinanced at a lower interest rate anytime soon?
So it's a great question. Refunding is not uncommon. Usually there's a 10-year, after 10 years, you can refund. I think most of these bonds are probably structured that way. We could do an analysis. None of them are going to be eligible to be refunded in the next biennium. Certainly as they get closer, we'll look at that and see where interest rates are. You know, obviously interest rates are really favorable right now. If any of these could be refinanced now, we would definitely do it. But the refunding of these bonds is something we'll keep our eye on as they become closer, as we get closer to maturity. But none of these are there's no opportunity to refund any of them before 10 years. So just looking at this, the first one would be the 2013, and that would be in 2023.
Wasn't there a 2007 one?
Yeah, but it's $100,000.
Oh.
Okay. I'm gonna, if you have any, if questions pop into your mind that you want to answer on this debt thing, I'm happy to go back to it too. But since I have silence, I will move on to fund balance. So just really quickly, so I want to let you know kind of where we're going to start in terms of general fund balance, or where we expect to start 2021-2022 biennium. So we ended the 2019 with about $9.7 million in general fund ending fund balance. We came to you earlier this year when we were kind of dealing with the financial impacts of COVID, and said we've got a $5.4 million problem this year, which would leave us with not enough fund balance to be financially stable. Due to the measures that have been taken since then with layoffs, furloughs, hiring freeze, spending freeze, those things, we think we're going to whittle away at that fund balance by a little less than $2 million, which will leave us with a ending fund balance just under $8 million. Just to give you just for perspective, I want to give you an idea of what our target says. So by policy, our minimum fund balance target is 90 days reserve. That number is $13.2 million. So we're more than $5 million off of our own target. There's kind of a best practice in the industry that irrespective of the type of local government you're in or what your revenue mix looks like, 60 days is kind of the standard for minimum fund balance targets. And that's what our old fund balance target was. That gives us a number of $8.8 million that we should have in the bank. So we're almost $1 million below that. I think the $7.9 million is not going to cause us any immediate problems. And I think last Tuesday night I said, you know, we're not in this alone. Everybody's kind of dealing with it. It came out of nowhere, and it's been pretty traumatic financially to the organization. But the point is, and I just called this the challenge when it comes to fund balance, is to balance the budget without using fund balance and to rebuild the fund balance. To the extent that we've used fund balance to balance the budget in the past, that's just not an option this year. We're going to have to balance operating expenditures with general fund revenues. There really is not another option. And so I just wanted to highlight this item for you. It's also the end of my presentation, so I'm going to unshare this, but of course, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to go back to the Davina, or excuse me, Councilmember Dewar had asked a question about some of the items that were funded in prior years and trying to just understand the enormity of our debt versus the city surrounding us. It appears that the majority of that, if I'm not mistaken, was the public safety levy, city hall, and properties.
Yeah, that's correct. Crossroads would be the other piece of it. Then if you throw Crossroads is the 522 straightening project. If you throw that in there, then you've covered like 90% of that debt or more.
And so just in looking at long term, if we hadn't had those projects on and we were going through this pandemic, this issue that we're going through now, would we have had this type of budget deficit?
It's an interesting question.
And I don't mean to interrupt you. The only reason I'm asking the question is because for typically as a project manager, I forecast future of what my costs are going to be in the future. And as a council member, you know, I want to just understand as we go through and put bonds and levies and, you know, build buildings and do all these road widenings and do all these projects. Obviously, there's a process and a time which those come due. They have to pay for them. And if we don't have the resources to pay for them in the future, then it puts a heavy strain on those years, those budget years. And so I just want to make sure that I fully understand moving forward, what is the best way to set policy, to move things forward so that we're being fiscally responsible. I just kind of want to hear from you that type of planning as we go through this process, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good question. I think that the answer is really complicated, is why I'm a little cagey when it comes to answering it. I think asking questions if we're going into something like one of these major projects, asking questions like, how are we going to pay for this? And like looking for a long range financial plan to deal with it, and that has a lot of specificity in it, and that you really understand the assumptions that have been made. Those are all really, really important things to do. I can't speak to the process that led to all this debt ending up on our books. But I can tell you that just there's a couple things that if you kind of follow the breadcrumbs, there's a couple things that were pretty optimistic, that were expected to happen, that would have may have led people to think that this debt would not be so, I don't want to say problematic, because we'll deal with it and we have these awesome projects that are now complete, but that are so burdensome, I guess, in the economic times that we're currently dealing with.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Zorns had a question.
I had asked city manager, I don't know, a month or so ago about refinancing City Hall as well. And I'm trying to recall how far that's before we could even refinance that. Is that 3 years out, or is it longer than that?
It's 5 years from now.
5 years. 5 years. You know, and then the other thing that I'm struck with as we look at the debt, you know, that you have listed here for the different bonds and things, that doesn't even include the real cost of cleaning up the soil on the property. I mean, if we were to add what the cleanup is, the price for that for those properties is, I mean, at some point we're going to know that number, and we better be sitting down when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's been very expensive.
Well, thank you for unearthing everything and helping us dive through this.
Councilmember Thompson.
Director Bothwell, I had a question. When we talk about refinancing, is the main savings to do with rate, or is the main savings on an annual basis to do with extending the term?
That's a really good question. Historically, the answer would be rate. I think just based on the nature of our debt, and particularly when it comes to City Hall, I think, and the lifespan of the asset, I think we should be looking at whether or not, when we go into to refund it, whether or not there is an option to extend it, extend the term. Just because honestly, like it's a lot of money, and the debt service on that is really affecting our ability to do other things. And so I think we should look at all options. But to be honest with you, historically, it's always been about rate. So I'm not sure if we even can go out another 20 years. We could, 20 years is the longest you can issue a municipal bond for. I'm not sure if we could start, if we refinance it or do a refunding on the bond and start the clock over with another 20 years to reduce the debt service on it. I don't even know if that's an option because it's always been about rate, but it's something we'll probably look at.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all for your questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Oh, Councilmember McNeil.
I just wanted to, Director, I just wanted to say thank you. The information you were giving us, hands down, has probably been the best I've seen since I've been on council. So I just wanted to give you a compliment for that. Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot to me.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
So we also had a piece of your capacity analysis, and one of the areas for generating income was bringing back U.S. passport services. Is that something that we could house and do again?
So that item, so yeah, you're right. So there's a mention of that in the report, in specifically in the scope of what's not included in the report, which was programmatic revenue, which would be, we'd be offering a new line of services. Traffic safety cameras were also mentioned in there.
Right.
So that's something I believe that the court is going to have, is going to mention in their presentation. So I don't want to steal their thunder.
Okay, I'll just wait. Thank you.
Councilmember Dewar.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I am so confused because we got rid of passports to save money. So I'm really, really confused why we're now talking about bringing them back.
Different judge, different time. So the judge would like to reevaluate that option.
Makes for very confusing policy decisions.
I understand.
All right. Thank you very much, Director Bothwell. Excellent presentation, setting the bar high. But let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 7:25. All right, welcome back, everyone. Uh, so now we are on to the executive with city manager.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my presentation. Maybe? Yeah. Got it all set up. Okay. Try again. Okay, second try. Okay, so this portion of the goal workshop or budget workshop is to discuss the council goals. So normally we would have met at the beginning of the year. We had planned for a March goal setting session, and we would have spent a day with the council, giving you the opportunity to really talk about what you would like us to accomplish in 21-22. And sadly, the theme for 2020 will be the impacts of COVID-19. And so we were required to cancel that workshop. So what I want to try to do for you tonight is just tee up a conversation. And obviously we don't have a day. And tonight is a long night, and we're hoping still to get through some department budget presentations to provide you with some information and provide you with an opportunity to talk about some of the things that you would like to see accomplished and what goals you would really like to have the city focus on. And what I've done is I provided some information to help you with that. And the best place to start when we talk about goals is Imagine Bothell. That's our comprehensive plan, and that's how we plan out the future of Bothell. And a lot of work is put into that, and we'll be doing an update to that in the next couple of years. And it really sets the path for where we're going to go as a community and as an organization. So you can see I put down the vision statement that comes from the Imagine Bothell comprehensive plan. There's a mission statement. And also within that plan, there are a lot of principles. And this was a community process. So this is the community speaking about what they think is important. And so I provided that as background information to just remind the council and remind the community about things that were talked about and things that the community felt were important. This is a pretty long list of things, and it doesn't really help narrow things down. But I just thought it was a good reminder of things that are important, that were important to the community, and how we are leading Bothell in a direction and what direction we're going. So it's just some of those items. Hopefully you've had a chance to look through those and can be reminded of some of the priorities that the community sees for Bothell. If you boil it all down, it's basically into these categories. And so we have several categories, and the environment and public service sort of overlap all of those. And it's really all about the community. Everything we do, community's in the center, and we're trying to provide all of these services to move our community forward and support our community. So these categories basically are so transportation, allocating public funds for pedestrian, bicycle, and other types of uses, multimodal and vehicles. Housing, to provide accessible, stable, healthy, safe housing. Land use, we want to plan for and allow growth. We're required to grow. The state requires that we plan for growth. So we want to make sure that we do that we properly plan for growth in our community. Civic, protect and affirm all communities regardless of race, age, sex, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, age, religion, veteran status, or income. Very important that we have equity and that we treat everyone in the Bothell community as equal. Public space, we want to provide adequate access to public spaces. Development design, we want to make sure that our design is, we minimize negative impacts, that it's consistent and predictable process for those who want to do development in our community, and that we incorporate the cultural needs into the development in our community. Public service, we want to provide universal access to essential services, and for the environment, we want to mitigate environmental threats to achieve long-term sustainability. So those are sort of overarching principles when you look at the comp plan. This is also good overarching principles for just good leadership and good visioning for a community. Okay, I'm not moving forward. Here we go. So in 2019-2020, the council adopted 10 goals, and I provided a list of those goals here as a reminder. These goals were established initially in 2016, and Bothell was in a different place then, a different administration. There was many new council members, and there was really an opportunity to look at what Bothell needed at that time. It was really focused on a lot of strategies, and it was good. We needed strategies, and we needed to move things forward. But these goals aren't really as connected to the community as I thought they could be. So talking with the mayor, I've taken the liberty of sort of paring these goals down into 5 categories, really tried to connect them more strongly and emotionally to our community and what we think the community needs. So if we look at those and we pare them down, we look at a smart organization. A smart organization has strong principles, it has an engaged staff, and it's aligned with the community. Community health for all, supporting physical, financial, and mental well-being of all who are in our community. Community engagement, connecting with people and fostering change. How do we do that? How do we move our community forward? Community safety and accountability, fostering a feeling of well-being, and environmental stewardship and sustainability, protecting our future. So those are just provided as an opportunity for council to talk about the goals. These are just proposed categories. They are not it's not set in stone. These are the council goals. And so anything that you would like to change, remove, you can throw this out, you can start fresh. But this sort of pared down what we had been working on in 2000, really since 2016, sort of brought it in together into these 5 categories that hopefully are something that council can feel connected to and the community can feel connected to. So I want to go through each one and talk a little bit about sort of some of the strategic objectives that council could prioritize towards that we work towards accomplishing those goals. So for a smart organization, it would be things like succession planning or employee engagement. We have a safety program and a wellness program. We have a diversity inclusion committee. We are looking to add a safety officer to improve our cybersecurity, asset replacement, and a financial strategy and making sure that we're financially stable. That would fall under a smart organization. Some of the things on the list we're doing, some of the things that we're not. And so those would be open for council discussion and some of the direction that I'd be looking for by July 7th. Community health for all. Strategic objectives would include affordable housing. You passed an affordable housing strategic plan, and we're working on the implementation of that. We've talked at length about the Navigator program. The judge will be speaking with you about a community court. Many of you saw the community court down in Olympia when you were down there earlier this year. Human services. How do we deliver human services to our community? The council has expressed an interest in providing the administration for NPRSA. Ball field replacements, parking, the economic development and business resiliency program, community resiliency when it comes to emergency preparedness. So those kinds of things would fall under community health for all. Community engagement, again, trying to connect people and fostering change within our community. So things like a diversity strategic plan. This is something new, and it's come about from what we've experienced and what the mayor spoke about at the beginning of the meeting. How do we really bring our community together, and how do we start to have some of those conversations? How do we lay out what that's going to look like? And a diversity strategic plan could do that. And so that would be an opportunity to really enhance our community engagement. It's not something that we're doing today. City-sponsored events. 2 years ago in your 2019-2020 budget, you hired a volunteer and events coordinator. You've adopted an arts and cultural plan. The implementation of that plan now is the next step that would need to be funded and discussed. Again, many programs, volunteer communications, an engagement program, online engagement tools. Council has talked about that. There's tools out there where as part of the council meeting, the community can be more engaged. Historic building preservation. We still have to work on the former Wayne Golf Course and a master plan and a naming for that. And our very successful tourism program. So those would fall under community engagement. For safety and accountability, again, things like emergency preparedness. We want to construct our 2 fire stations. We want to connect our community to policing. We want to continue our Navigator community policing programs. We could look at some options for dispatch. There's a fire strategic plan that was passed a couple of years ago and continued implementation of that. And so other types of things that fall under community safety and accountability. And environmental sustainability. So a list of things here as well. Very important, Sammamish River restoration. That was part of the purchase of the former Wayne Golf Course. We have the comprehensive plan, as well as development environmental regulations that need to be updated by 2024. So work needs to begin in 2022 on those so that we can be prepared and have the adoption in 2024. Those are both very large labor intensive programs. Trip reduction programs, pollution prevention assistance program. And so just an example of some of the things that we could work on to accomplish these goals. The things that I've just listed under these 5 goals are not complete lists. It's just to give you an example. It's things that we've talked about, that council has talked about, that we think from a staff perspective is important, and some of the things that we're currently doing to help achieve your goals. So the next step is really for the council to have a discussion to see what is of interest, what you think your goals should look like, and start to think about some of the strategic objectives, not to make a decision on strategic objectives, but I wanted to give you those so you would have a better sense of what each of those goals would entail. And then listen to the department budgets, have a conversation with the department heads to help determine what your priorities might be, understand what we think we can do under the current budget, and where some things are that maybe you can live without or that you really think are important to move our organization forward, our community forward. And then, as I mentioned early on, to provide me policy direction, because what we want to then do in the summer month, July, August, and September, will be then compiling the budget at a much more detailed level and bringing that to you in the September, October timeframe. And so I turn it over to you. Again, I want to thank Director Bothell for his presentation and his incredibly hard work in putting all of this together. We tried to present a budget. We knew even in 2019, 2020, that we were going to have we had a structural deficit then, and we knew we were going to have to continue to make challenging decisions. COVID-19 has added an extra layer on that that's made this budget even more challenging. We tried to come up with revenue assumptions that are reasonable. As Director Bothell mentioned, this is just uncharted. And to start to make really aggressive revenue decisions based on what we see today could be catastrophic for this organization. And so what we've tried to do is come up with reasonable revenue projections that don't require such draconian cuts. So we've already laid off 14 talented individuals from this organization. We don't want to lay off additional people. We don't want to cut programs. We don't want to cut departments based on speculative information. So our strategy of trying to shore up 2020, better understand the revenue projections and the revenue that's going to come in 2020 so that we can make informed decisions with the council in 21 and 22. And that's why we're really focusing on the 2021 budget. But if for any reason, the economy really starts to struggle and we see, even more negative news coming out, we absolutely would bring that back. We have an opportunity to discuss it with you in the fall. We plan to adopt this budget or have you adopt this budget in November. That would be another opportunity to have the discussion. And anytime we would see some sort of drastic change, we would bring that back to you for further action so that what we're trying to do now is based on the information that we have to the best of our ability, provide you information so you can make informed decisions that are necessary but not draconian. So I turn it over to the mayor to facilitate the conversation about your goals, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. I need to stop sharing. Oh dear. Hold on. I can do that.
Councilmember Thompson.
Always got to remember to unmute, but that's better than when I forget to mute. Thank you, City Manager Phillips. I had a couple questions. In the overarching principles under transportation, you mentioned, it's allocate public funds for pedestrian, bicycle, mass transit vehicles. Do you know roughly what the percentage spread in funding for those 4 options were in terms of the last biennium? Okay.
I have no idea.
Okay. And then I suppose the next part isn't really a question, but more of a comment for discussion for council. I really appreciate what the city manager did in terms of it seems like distilling just about everything that we do into 5 goals. I'm just concerned they aren't quite specific enough. I would love to see goals that are more concrete, that are more measurable and more specific. I'm totally fine with fewer goals. You know, with in the budget situation that we're in, I mean, we're going to have to pick and choose what our goals are. But I would love to see things that are more specific and more measurable. And if that's a narrower focus, I'm completely okay with that.
And these are our council goals, so they're up to us to develop and define as we see fit. Councilmember Dewar.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor. I keep losing my cursor and I can't talk. Anyway, or on mute. I would sort of agree. It feels like everything that we already do is in a category now, and that means the goal is I guess to maintain what we're already doing. It seems like we're not, and I understand because we don't have the money. But I guess I would be interested in maybe goals that are more specific, such as I don't know, maintenance of existing facilities, maintaining what we already own. Because the one thing, like in the transportation piece, it talked about bike and infrastructure and transportation, but we, you know, we need to maintain the streets that we have. Maybe for me personally, putting more emphasis on maintaining what we have instead of enlarging what we're doing, especially at this time. Another thing, maybe another idea would be going after low hanging fruit, like things like the dog park that don't cost a lot of money, but have a big bang with the community. I don't know if that makes sense, but goals should be priorities. And if everything falls under a category, then it doesn't feel like there are priorities as much. So I'd like also something more specific. Obviously, through the lens of understanding, we don't have money to put, you know, towards things, but maybe just prioritizing how we might use the existing assets that we have. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
I really appreciate the, you know, given the constraints that we have for 2020, the consolidation of the goals. There is one piece that's missing, and I guess we can talk about it in July. And maybe it's in here and I'm not seeing, but from Imagine Bothell principles, there's enhanced neighborhoods identity, protect neighborhoods by incompatible uses, and then also honor the past and provide perspective for the future by preserving historic buildings and other links to our early years. And I see historic building preservation, but I don't really see anything in our goals that has any kind of nod to neighborhood. You know, what we do to protect neighborhoods. I don't see anything in these goals that speak to protecting neighborhoods. Am I missing it? Sorry. Last week is the cat. This week it's the dog.
So again, it sit under the strategic objective. So the idea behind the goals is that you have lofty goals. So when we say things like community health for all, it's a lofty goal, and it's the strategic objectives.
Sorry, I'm listening.
It's the strategic objectives that then become the measurable. So if you wanted to say community health for all, and the strategic objective then is to care for your existing infrastructure, or you wanted to have things that were more measurable, that would fall under your strategic objectives. You can do anything you like, but that's more the tradition is to have the goals. I tried very hard to pare down the information in the comprehensive plan. So I'm sure that I missed some things because I tried to sort of condense down a very, very wordy document. And again, the list that I provided is not an all-inclusive list. It was just to provide you with some examples of things that we're either working on or that I've heard the council talk about before, but I'm sure there's many things that could be added.
No, yeah, no criticism because it was very well done. You were probably really good at writing papers in college too. So no criticism on my end. I just want to make sure because I know when we have things brought forth as agenda items, we're said it meets this piece of the of council goals, and I couldn't see. We've got some great, you've got some great items in here, but I couldn't see anything that would say, yeah, this piece of zoning meets our requirements to provide whatever for our neighborhood. So we'll have that conversation in July. So thank you.
Councilmember Dewar, can you mute your mic, please?
Sorry, I thought I had. I'm having trouble with my computer. I'll try again.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Agnew?
Yeah, I think the goals are fine, especially if under smart organization, we're going to talk about fiscal stability. And I think that needs to be our number one goal, is trying to get our finances back in order.
Councilmember McAuliffe?
So I think that I agree with Councilmember Agnew. First of all, it's about getting our finances in order. But secondly, our second goal needs to be about safety and community responses. What does our community need now? Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Okay. It's not about this whole list of goals. They're all wonderful, but that was a time when we could really do something. Today, we have limited resources. We have limited opportunities in dollars, and we need to think about what are our priorities. Our priorities should be our community, safety, and serving our community needs. So I think we need to look at these broad goals and say, where are our priorities and what do we need to do first and foremost? Because we have limited dollars. And all of our businesses, our people, our community, they need us to help them, and we need to give them resources. So I think we need to say, okay, this is a great deal of goals, but let's limit them down. Let's get them ratcheted down to the essential needs of today. This is a new day.
Councilmember McNeil?
Thank you, Mayor. I actually like the goal process that we've gone through over the past several years. I feel it's intuitive. It comes from different lenses. Each of us come from a different place, and we're seeing the community in different ways, and we're talking to different people. And the goal setting process that we go through, from where it was when I first came on council to where the city manager has us now, is amazing. It's amazing to see all the things that we have, all the goals that we have, but they're just that, they're goals. Sometimes you reach your goals, sometimes you don't. But if you don't put something up there, it means you're probably not going to be talking. So I like the process that we go through. I hope we have more conversations, have the ability to talk more about goals and things that our community is speaking about. I mean, obviously, we're getting emails about things that matter in Main Street and fireworks and so on. So I think it's important that we continue to have these goals and talk about them. But I would agree with Councilmember Agnew. I think that we need to prioritize being fiscally responsible. And what I mean by that is I often feel like when I don't know what I don't know, sometimes I want to ask 101 questions. But I think it's important for us to ask 101 questions because that's how we become in the know. And that's how we make good financial decisions, and we don't get into the situation that we're in right now with what the decisions that were made in the past, and now we're trying to fix them. Because the last thing I think we want to do as a council is put a future council in the same position that we're in today. We want our city to become stronger and more fiscally able to pay for the things that we're doing and give our community much more assets. With that said, prioritizing existing assets, I think, is important in understanding what they cost. Making sure that we understand, if we don't fix this today or replace this today, what is it going to cost us tomorrow? So looking ahead, so, you've got an engine or you got a sports field. If you don't fix it, the sports field gets shut down. Now, none of the kids within the community can use that. It's not just a dollar impact, it's also a human impact. It's also not allowing families to become active or be out and be active. So understanding those nuances with not just the financial piece of it, but long term, what it's going to cost us into the future, I think is important. Our human services, I think the city manager touched on it a little bit in her presentation. Understanding that the dollars that we're spending right now, being fiscally responsible and making sure those dollars are in our community, helping our community, are important. They're very impactful. And I think that we do a phenomenal job. Hats off to I'm on the Human Services Committee, but Davina, Councilmember Doerr's been on there, Councilmember McAuliffe. We're always thinking about ensuring that the money goes to the right place, but I think we need to take a longer, harder look and ensure those dollars are going back into our community, especially right now with all the things that, the issues that we have. Our community spoke loud and clear on our senior center. I think that we're gonna hopefully be hearing about how the city can help our senior center, the MPRSA. We want to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and that the MPRSA, the levy dollars, are being spent the way they're supposed to be spent. In our city, we can help do that. We have a lot to work on, and I'm proud to work on those things. I want to continue to have the conversations. Right now, I think it's important, the things that we're hearing across our nation right now, that we as a community make sure that our entire community feels welcome here. There's been several protests, several marches within our community. Even this last weekend, we have younger generation that spoke to things that are important to them. And so I think it's important that we listen to them, but I think it's important that we also educate them on what things cost. We educate ourselves on what things cost so that we can move our community forward, being fiscally responsible and ensuring that our community gets what they're wanting to have.
Thank you for that. I'll just say a couple things. I like how the city manager phrased it as some of our strategic objectives. I think using our volunteer coordinator, and I think if anything, COVID has brought people so that they're staying locally, looking within the community more and more. I think they're looking for opportunities. And so I think having the objective and some reportable statistics on how we're creating opportunities for volunteers within the community, I think it's something that can be measured and something that engages the city. I think one of the other goals that was in one of the lists was community engagement. I think every time a challenging topic comes up, one of the first places we go is, what's the community think? We need to hear more from the community, and I think anything we can do to bolster that and utilize our technology that just, especially with COVID, has advanced. As we're seeing here, we're getting better at these meetings every time. If there's something that we can learn from this and plug into community engagement, I think that'd be learning from this challenging times. So yeah, city manager, are you getting what you're hoping out of this, or were you looking for more specific answers?
I think a couple more council members maybe wanted to speak, or do you want me to answer?
I guess if you could give a little feedback on it first before, because we've all gone through once, and so I just wanted to see a little check-in with you and see that we're kind of hitting the target. So yeah.
Okay, I just didn't want to speak out of turn, so thank
Yeah.
you. So what I'm hearing is that generally the council likes the 5 goals, but to add an additional one that specifically addresses financial stability. So couldn't make the finance director more happy than that. So I can, then we would have strategic objectives specific to ensuring the financial stability of the organization. That's what I'm hearing so far.
Right. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on a couple things that I know Council members Dewar and Agnew mentioned fiscal responsibility, and I really liked what Council Member McNeil said about not leaving sort of the same mess for future councils. We have a structural budget deficit, and I would love to be able to look at the structure of our city over the long term so that we can accomplish that goal of not leaving future councils with this same challenge. I would love, as part of the financial piece, to look at expected revenue versus expenses added as a planning component when we're making zoning or planning decisions. Um, you know, if we're talking about ways to raise revenue, and if we have a structural deficit and we go and we ask the public or the business community for revenue, I feel like we owe it to them to look at the structural deficit and address that. Councilmember Zorns has brought up a really good point in the past that not every decision should be made because of raw dollars and cents. And I completely agree with her, but I do think it should be a component of the discussion. So if we're building something that won't pay for the services and maintenance it needs over the long term with the tax revenue, at least we know how much what we're buying will cost. And we'll also know which development we allow that will help make up the difference. So just looking at that as part of our planning process, because if we have a structural deficit, we need to look at the structure of our city and how to fix that. And this isn't something that's going to help this biennial budget. I know that this is something that's going to happen over the long term. But I think long term is really important for those future council members. Another thing that I would like to see us do is prioritize human scale transportation as a budget issue. I don't know the numbers, but a significant amount of our public works and public safety expense revolves around the dominant form of transportation is cars. The police department. I looked ahead a couple days, and they're asking for an additional $1 million plus for car impounding. When we did the court study last year of the top 10 case types, over 70% of that case volume was related to driving infractions. From parking hindering development, like we heard about at the Canyon Park study a week or two ago, and reducing potential tax revenue to all of the expenses surrounding cars as the dominant form of transportation. I think we should prioritize giving people other ways to get around as a budget priority. Um, I'm not saying that we only need to do those things. We can't ignore the main way people use to get around. But as we decide what to spend money on it, and I love what I'm hearing in terms of everybody talking about the budget, I think it would be really wise to spend money on things that will either make us money or lower expenses. And bike and pedestrian infrastructure or human scale transportation, to include scooters and new forms of micromobility, it does both of those. It also hits on just about all of the other council goals that we have as well. Not just fiscal responsibility and stability, community health, public safety, economic development. It hits on affordable housing and environmental stewardship for sure. Cars are the single biggest cause of fossil fuel emissions in Washington, and we will not hit our climate goals without doing something meaningful to lower vehicle miles traveled. Now, you're all probably chuckling a little bit because I know that this is totally on brand for me, but I think I think we need to provide people other ways to get around. The goal isn't to force people out of their cars as much as it is to force fewer people into cars by giving them more transportation options. Um, the other thing that I would love to talk about is outdoor public space. because as we deal with this health crisis that seems like it's going to last longer than we'd all like it to, outdoor public space will be absolutely critical. Mayor Olson, I loved what you said about leveraging the volunteer coordinator. I think there's things we can do in our open space and do that. And I've got some ideas, and I'm going a long time, so I'm not going to go into everything here. But there's opportunities we have that I'd love to talk about in parks, but also not just in parks. We've seen the one block of Main Street that we've opened up to people has been really popular. I would love to look at creating some sort of town square in Canyon Park as part of that master plan. That we could have like that European style plaza be a hub for outdoor markets, concerts, other events. To summarize, I want to add expected revenue compared to expenses for future development, and look at outdoor public space and prioritize human scale transportation. And I'm going to stop talking now.
Councilmember Dewar.
Okay, thank you. There's so much that I agree with that everyone has said, but for me, I'm going to summarize what I've heard that I like and that I think are more specific goals. One is get our financial house in order. Two is maintaining what we have, prioritizing maintaining what we have. Three, I think, hasn't really been mentioned specifically, but I think should definitely be a goal and priority, and that is to help our community through this crisis. Rebuilding our economy, rebuilding our tax base, doing what we can to help businesses stay in business and be healthy, but also our community, and that means human services. This crisis is going to put an even bigger strain on human services. We need to make sure we take care of people. Nobody wants to see more homeless people, more drug use. There's a lot of strain on people right now. And then I loved the thought about when we make land use decisions, really involving the finance director in helping us just know the ramifications, the financial ramifications of the decisions that we're making. City manager has spoken a few times before about how decisions made in the past that we're going to be a bedroom community and not have stores and not prioritize, a tax base and sales tax has long lasting ramifications. One of the topics that has really brought this to my attention is the whole idea of Sound Transit taking one of our prime downtown, potentially taking one of our prime downtown sites to use for a bus barn, or not a bus barn, for transit parking, but that also has impacts on our revenue. And we need to understand every time we make a land use decision, what are the ramifications? So I love that. And I think environmental stewardship, that is an existential crisis that has to be one of the goals. So yeah, I guess the thing that I really wanted to add that we hadn't really talked about was the aspect of prioritizing rebuilding our community and supporting it through this crisis. I think that we can't not make that a goal. That has to be right up there, top 2 or 3. So thank you.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. So I think we have some wonderful goals, and they were able to be made in better times. I think now we have to kind of reduce those goals down to what the community needs are. So first of all, I think we have to look at what are our priorities. Our priorities should be safety and addressing the community needs. That would be my number one. And then as you move on, you have to be really strategic in what you decide we can do today, because we have a $12 million deficit, correct? And if we have that, we have to think about what we can afford to do and what our community needs. So we might have to rethink all of our principles and goals and say, here's our most immediate. The community needs, our family needs. There are a lot of people out there that are really struggling, and I want to see how we can make sure they have access to support. However we do it, they need to be able to come to their city and say, this is what I need, and we should be able to like direct them. I don't have to help them, but just direct them. So I guess I want to just say my top principles would be safety and how our community needs us to help them, whether it's business or families or whatever. I think we need to simplify our goals and just kind of focus on what is the immediate problem and what we could do now.
Councilmember McNeil.
I almost had the cursor issue. I fixed it quickly. Just a couple follow-ups. I like the comments Councilmember Thomas brought up about cost information. While not everything should be, not all decisions should be based on costs, and some things are smaller costs. I like that comment. I would still like to get the information on things like that, because as we've seen in the past, a bunch of small things can add up to much larger. But I did like the comment on making sure that we get that information. I like the idea also, while we're not able to profit on things, we still have an opportunity to partner with other organizations to find ways to help pay for things. We do a phenomenal job with our grants within our community. Our city staff and grants writers have been doing an awesome job with that. Parks, everything. So just continuing to find ways to partner and economic development, all those types of things would really help, I think. Personally, human services, I think Councilmember Dorr mentioned human services. We have a public health crisis right now in our country. And, I had the opportunity to go to a march on Saturday and hear from the students of the North Shore School District. Not all of them live in the city of Bothell, but they all attend the school district that most of us have kids attend or attended. And I can tell you right now that Councilmember Dorr, this council, this city, this community, the school district, we all need to put an emphasis on ensuring that our kids are safe. I can't stress it enough. Hearing from them and what the comments that they were making and the stories they were telling are stories that I lived 40 years ago. So if there's anything we can do on inclusion and equity and fairness within our community, I believe Bothell can lead the way on this. And I know each and every one of you in your hearts wants to do this. So I think we should, as a council, make an emphasis. We sign proclamations, we do all these different things, but I think we need to focus, even if we have to put our own personal time, additional time into this, it's imperative that we do it. And we do it together as a body of one. And then lastly, just understanding the costs of all the things that we're doing as we're moving through them. For me, I feel it's important for us to understand what things cost. Even like putting up barricades for downtown Main Street, we're being fiscally responsible because we can pay for that with CARES funding, right? That is what our community is asking us to do. So just understanding, having the facts, making good decisions, but strongly, I think we really need to focus inward on the big word that the city manager brought up, which is community.
All right, listening to everyone's comments, I can definitely agree with our financial health as our number one issue, and I appreciate the city manager adding that as one of our goals. I think from the start of my time on the council, I heard about the structural deficit and that it's going to become more and more present. It's not going away. Everything just becoming more expensive. So I appreciate that everyone is realizing and acknowledging that as well. Um, in some of Andy's last meetings, I think it was his last meeting, he said, that was one of his goals and one of his accomplishments was to leave the city better than when he came on the council. So I think that's a goal each one of us should share as well. I know it's definitely a goal for me. City manager? I think everyone that's spoken has spoken.
It's great feedback. I'll see what I can create from all of those priorities. So let me, I'll bring something back on July 7th that hopefully meets your expectations, and you can continue to modify it at that meeting and if necessary, again at the next meeting. But I'll see what I can craft that would meet those expectations.
All right. So then moving through our agenda here. So what is our next item on? Okay. Okay. All right. So that, and there we are.
Jennifer, you're muted.
Did I just get unmuted? Thank you. Once you go into the presentation, you can't see any of that anymore. Thank you, Robin. All right. So this is the executive budget presentation. So again, we're providing the highest level of budget information just to give you an initial snapshot of what each of the departments would be expecting to spend in 21-22. But the focus really is about the kinds of services and policies. That's where we need the direction. So we're hopeful that we can share with you things that we think each of the departments would like to do, areas that we cut, and additional needs that we may have. So you'll see a similar format as each of the departments present their budget. So I'm starting with the executive budget. A very brief overview. This is the executive department. We have a variety of responsibilities and programs that are housed in the executive department. Again, that list of accomplishments that we would love to make pages and pages long, but just a couple of things to highlight. We stood up the Emergency Coordination Center and responded to the COVID-19. We continue to do that. We supported the Bothell businesses through the COVID-19, and we're also delivering reopening kits. That'll be happening next Tuesday on June 30th, to plug that from 9 to 3 here in the plaza. We brought in-house all remaining records that were stored off-site, saving thousands of dollars each year, so we have no more off-site storage. We rebranded the city's tourism program and launched a brand new Begin at Bothell website, which is amazing. And then we drafted the cultural plan for council's consideration, and you adopted that. So just a very high-level example of just a few things that were accomplished out of the executive department. So the executive department consists of several different budgets. So this is for the legislative, this is the council budget. Again, just very high level, so you can see year to year what's happening with the council budget. The city clerk, oops, I skipped one, city manager. So this is communications, economic development, emergency preparedness. So again, just a high level glimpse of what's happening within the department. This is the city clerk. The tourism program. I did want to note a significant reduction in that because of what happened with the COVID crisis and the amount of tourism that has, the focus on tourism that has changed. We did renegotiate those contracts down substantially, and I appreciate the work of the tourism manager to be able to do that so that the expenses are more in line with what occurred during the closures and as we phase back in. So really appreciate the work on that. The Arts Commission, so we moved the staff member from 30% to 25%. So still supporting the Arts Commission, but reducing the amount of support. Human Services, so this is for, the amount right now is for contributions to the arts, so for our membership and our parity contribution. And you'll notice that nearly $800,000, which would be $8 a person, is no longer in the budget at this time. And that's certainly a policy decision for council's consideration. This is the sort of the catch-all budget. There's a variety of things in here, including solid waste and debt service. Again, a very high-level snapshot. We did make some reductions. So here's this human services, $776,000. That's not included. We reduced the tourism budget by $310,000. And what's also not included is the lobbyist and an executive consultant for some small things that need to occur by contract between the city council and the city manager. But the lobbyist is the large chunk of that. And so we need direction on whether that's an expenditure that you would like to continue into 21, 22. And then just some future opportunities to think about as you look at things that are a priority for you within the executive office. You did express interest in taking over the administration of NPRSA. That is a revenue neutral in the sense of any work, any people we hire, any individuals we hire, anyone who works on the NPRSA administration. If you choose to make that decision, which will be coming to you in July, we would receive revenue for that from NPRSA. However, what it does is it does limit capacity. So currently we're proposing about half time for the assistant city manager. So by taking that, oh dear, by taking that money from, they're going to switch those back on in a minute. By taking that staff time away and applying it to NPRSA for a period of time, it limits the number of projects we'll be able to deliver from the city manager's office. Another thing that I talked about early on was a strategic diversity initiative. This is exactly what Councilmember McNeil was discussing. This would be an opportunity. We don't have the in-house staff nor the expertise. So this would require a consultant and or a full-time staff person, but a strategic diversity initiative to really look at who we are as an organization and who we are as a community, and to start to facilitate those conversations and have them basically woven into your decision-making and the programs that we deliver and the services we deliver and who we are as a community. So certainly something very interesting in these times that I really think could take Bothell. I agree. I think we can be a leader in this. We're poised to do that. We have an outstanding organization. We already have a diversity and inclusion committee. So we've already initiated work, and I believe our community is really ready to have these kinds of conversations. A more strategic human services initiative. So we've talked to the council a couple of times about how we spend the human services monies. We've tried a collaborative program with Bellevue. We now have 46 contracts for all the different human services providers. Is there a better strategy to be able to do that? How do we better reach out specifically for Bothell residents and Bothell businesses and the Bothell community? And make sure that we're really, that those monies are accountable and they're being delivered here in Bothell. And I think there's some opportunities to look at that. A community engagement program, we have an assistant to the city manager. She's been heavily focused in communications in her time that she's been with us so far, revamping the communications, and obviously with COVID and other things, communications has been absolutely vital in how we're connecting with our community. So the community engagement program is sort of not at the forefront. And so if there's more interest in that, I need to know where that lies in your priorities. Council's asked before about online community participation in council meetings. We would need a new agenda management system to be able to do that. We still need to address downtown parking, and then implementation of the cultural plan, which then requires additional resources and staff. So those were just some highlights that we thought would be of interest for the council, and I'm happy to answer any questions the council might have about the executive budget. And I'm going to stop sharing this so that you can go back to seeing each other.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just curious, the future opportunities, you mentioned NPRSA is revenue neutral, but the other items, I'm not so sure about what the costs are and if these are even proposed I'm not sure how to take this list and what to do with it.
Well, so that's the challenging part, right? To put work into doing cost estimates for things that may or may not be of interest to council. We don't have that kind of depth of staff. And so this is why it's about priorities. So if there's things that you're interested in, that's the information that I need. So then I can go and figure out how much those things are going to cost. And when I come back to you in September, October, then you'll still have some decisions to make and we'll be able to tell you this costs this costs this. By your policy direction and priorities, I'll be able to make some decisions as well to say, well, this and this were a priority. This was far less expensive. Let's put that in because we get a big bang for the buck here. And so that's what I'm really looking for. So we're trying really hard, other than the police budget, which had some specific dollar amounts. We're really looking for more that policy and priority direction. So I know it's hard. All the others have no revenue. They're all cost intensive. There are no revenue sources associated with the other items.
So, and we don't know if any of them have some sort of rate of return. I mean, obviously there's rates of return socially and culturally, but in terms of potential revenue, probably not. I mean, I guess downtown parking potentially.
Downtown parking is expensive because you have to do the enforcement. Then you have to add staff for the court system because of the impact on the court. So it's a pretty high threshold to be able to get it to be revenue neutral.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I mean, when you're able to answer those, that like, if you were able to do that for any more of this list, that would be super helpful, even if it's just like rough. Because otherwise it's just really hard. It's so hard to know whether it's worth pursuing, but we obviously have no money, right? So, all right, I guess I'll have to think on it longer.
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? It's we have a $12 million gap to fill. And so what I'm trying to understand is what are your priorities and how could I attain some of those? I mean, I think your discussion on the goals was dead on. You really do have limited options, but how do we maximize what those are? And so by giving me your priorities, it helps me sort of put that budget together and then bring you those options and those choices in September, October.
Yeah, I guess when I look at this list, I'm thinking back to the other conversation about easy wins. And when I think of easy wins, I think of MPRSA. That's a worthy community service that's not going to cost us. To me, that's easy win, like shutting down Main Street. Not a lot of cost, but potentially big benefits. And so that's kind of the lens that I'm looking at these lists through. Thank you.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess I'm interested in kind of knowing when we talk about a cultural plan, I think today we need to talk a little bit more about that. I don't know what that means, but we need to recognize that there are a lot of different people that live in Bothell, in the city of Bothell, and we don't often see them or know they're here, but they are. And so, what does it mean? What does a cultural plan mean? I guess that's what I care about. When I say my priorities, I want to say it's about community safety, it's about community needs, and it's about recognizing diversity and our different cultures and trying to do something to help us understand them all. So I know we have a lot of goals and principles, but because of our budget problem, we need to kind of ratchet things down a bit and think about what are our top priorities. And those are mine.
So
Thank you.
You've adopted the cultural plan that was developed by the Arts Commission, and it's focused on art and art and culture in our community. So the implementation of that plan is what's on that list. The diversity initiative would be about diversity and equity and inclusion.
All right. So I understand. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Yeah, I know I'm going to be preaching to the choir here, so I'm going to be, Captain Obvious here. looking at the future opportunities, there was a few topics that would require additional resources and staff or needed a consultant. And I have to say, I have zero interest in adding any personnel except for those who are phased back in for that we had to put a hiring freeze on from vacancies. It's going to be a very hard sell for, and I know you're already ahead of me on this, to add any more staff than we absolutely need. And I'm confident, Jennifer, that because you remind us all the time, staff can only do so much. So as we look at future opportunities, we have to figure out how much we can bite off and chew. And I'll be when we talk about looking through lenses, that's the lens I'm going to be looking through.
Councilmember Agnew.
Yeah, as far as the future opportunities go, the MPRSA administration is the one that I'd be looking at. It's revenue neutral. Most of the others, we're going to have to hire employees, and right now we have hiring freezes. I agree with Councilmember Zorn that I'm not a big proponent of hiring anybody at this point in time, till we replace some of the people that their positions have been frozen, and we haven't replaced some of the retirees and things along those lines. Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, is it possible to put that list back up? Thank you. So when I look at this list, I look at opportunity. If you remember way back in the beginning when we were talking about the MPRSA, we didn't know how that was going to come out, whether or not the city was going to have to deal with it, whether or not we're going to have to go get a levy. We did some study, we did some research. Not only did we pass a levy, but now we have an opportunity for a net neutral, financial net neutral working relationship with the MPRSA. When we look at the diversity initiative, human services, we just learned that we don't have anything in the budget for that. But it's not like we can stop providing human services to our community. Strategic diversity initiative, it doesn't really, I guess this would be a question for the city manager. Is it going to cost us anything to determine what it would cost, or if there's any partnerships or grants available to us to initiate that work? All of these things, I guess, for me, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying. The downtown parking, we've done studies on downtown parking. We know that it's going to cost us to implement a downtown parking plan. The cultural plan for arts implementation, we know what that is. Agenda management, online services. I mean, many cities around the area are using that. There's a cost that's associated with that. If we got the cost, we'd understand the cost to do that. Is there a benefit? Is there grant programs available? I'm not sure. The reason I bring this up is because I think there's opportunity in every single one of these. It's how we address that opportunity. And I would hate to sit here tonight, I guess, personally, and not look at these opportunities and understand what the costs are on them. Because as an example, I personally don't believe we should hold off on ensuring that we're working on a diversity initiative, an inclusive initiative. We talk about this in our proclamation, welcoming community. The mayor led off with tonight's meeting, talking about something that, quite frankly, was disturbing. But I applaud him for bringing that up, having that tough conversation. So for me personally, and I won't speak for the other six, I would like to know what these are going to cost, so that we at least have the opportunity to know what we're making a decision based on. If we have a grant that's available to us for the diversity initiative, why not take advantage of it? Just like we did with the MPRSA. So just my comment.
So I think that's really the challenge, right? So with the limited resources we have to cost out and to look at all these initiatives isn't achievable. This is the first of all of the departments you're about to hear from. And so what I'm looking for is things that you might be specifically interested in so that then I could cost those out and, and bring them back to you in the fall. So I understand that they're all appealing, but there some have to lay higher than others so that there is a priority over when you look at all the lists. So when you look at all 14 departments or however many we have, I think it's 14, um, that you're able to prioritize so that we can go back and specifically look at some because there are some serious initiatives that need to be considered and a tremendous amount of work has to happen between basically the 7th when you give us that direction and when we come back to you in the fall. And we can't possibly cost out all of those initiatives. We really need you to prioritize.
Councilmember Thompson.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would be the most interested on here that I think would have the most impact is the ability to preserve online community participation. You know, if that's something that we can use this software for, I'd be keenly interested in that because we already have this software. You know, when we talk about historically marginalized communities and underserved communities, I think giving them the opportunity to participate in the decision making process, even if they aren't able to make it physically to the meeting, is something concrete we can do to make sure we're hearing as many voices as we can. So for everything on here, that's the thing that strikes me as the most relevant to all of the issues that are going on in the world right
I'll just weigh in. So the two that caught my eye, and they almost go together. I mean, similar to Councilmember Thompson just said, was the community engagement and the agenda software. I think those two dovetail together. And also, speaking with the city clerk, the agenda software could actually be somewhat neutral, revenue neutral, based on the amount of work that goes into doing the agenda, and it could be, you know, savings of labor and just all of the staff time and what goes into the agenda. Uh, so, I mean, that one was interested, that drew my interest because it almost seems like there could be a small cost for some efficiencies there. Um, right, city manager?
Thank you. So that's the end of the executive presentation. Would you like to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break. Come back at 8:40. All right, and we're back. And it looks like we'll be moving on to finance with Director Bothwell.
All right, so I'm going to get through this really quickly just to be respectful of the schedule. So our department overview, everybody has a good idea what we do. Full service finance and accounting, everything from day-to-day accounting, reporting, annual reports, quarterly reports. We interface with the auditor when they're going through their audit of our financial reports. All of the budget administration is done out of our office. The leadership obviously comes from the city manager. Fiscal policy development, you all adopted financial policies a few months back. That was initiated out of our department, and the maintenance of that is also part of our department. Long-range financial planning, payroll, disbursements, and we have kind of two unusual ads in our department. We also do the capital facilities planning administration. We have a person dedicated to that function, and we also have a person that's dedicated to grant reimbursement management, and that's pretty much all they do. I think what's more remarkable than the tasks that are actually listed here is the resources that we have to do these. We have 6.5 kind of general accounting staff, including myself, and then we have the two, the capital facilities person and the grant reimbursement person. So we're total department currently of 8.5. We do have a position that's vacant. That's a 3/4 time position that would also be in kind of the general finance and accounting realm. But we're managing 20 accounting entities. We have 20 funds. And each one of those is like having doing the accounting for a business. So it's a tremendous amount of work. We have a really talented and dedicated staff that works really, really hard and is really committed to the success of the city. And that's the reason we're able to get all that done. So for our accomplishments for 19 and 20, the financial operations continuity during the pandemic, this is a huge one for us and something I'm really proud of. Nothing has happened, nothing in the finance department changed as a result of the pandemic in terms of workload, deadlines, all the things that we normally do, we had to continue to do, and we had to find a way to do them remotely. There's a lot of paper that comes into the finance office, all of our time cards, all the approvals for time cards, a lot of our AP comes in paper. And so we had to figure out how to navigate that environment with our customers effectively, the people that submit timesheets and such, not being able to push that paper to us. And the team has really pulled together and just done an amazing job. We haven't missed a deadline. We haven't missed a payment. They're really killing it. So they're doing a great job. Before the pandemic, we had a few things that we were pretty proud of too. So our credit rating was upgraded to an AA1 in conjunction with the sale of the fire station rebuilding bonds. We also did that $25.5 million bond issue as the first installment on the bonds for the fire station rebuilds. We updated and formalized the financial policies. That's something that you all saw a couple months ago. We're really proud of those policies. I think they're the right policies, and equally important is that there's a checkup in the policies that those are going to come back to the council we're going to review them every 2 years during budget cycle, and they're going to come back to the council, and we'll discuss those with them, with the council, make sure that the policies are still appropriate and still speak to the way we do business, are aligned with best practices and all those things. So it's really going to be kind of a living document that's going to guide the way we handle the finances in the city, which I think is really, really important. And we also received an award for our annual report and the distinguished budget presentation for the budget book for the 1920 budget. So here's a quick rundown of our expenses. Pretty straightforward. We're obviously mostly personnel expenses. The maintenance and operations line, it's a lot of money. It's mostly our state audit, so we have to go through an audit every year. Those expenses end up in that line item. That's the bulk of that one. It's largely uncontrollable, although we do the best we can to be good customers for our auditors, so that our fees don't go up because they're having to run around. Where we try to be ultra responsive and really kind of anticipate their questions and have our work papers in line so that we can minimize those expenses. So in terms of budget reductions, there isn't, like I said, there isn't a whole lot in there other than people. But we've got, we're proposing to re-engineer the treasury function and save about $40,000 in banking fees over the biennium. We've also got some money set aside in our budget to perform utility tax audits, and we're proposing to bring that program in-house and see if we can do that with available staff. That's going to be a pretty heavy lift for us, and so my ask of the city manager is that we don't start that until we're fully staffed after we're unfrozen in the finance department. And then we also lost a position in the recent layoffs too. And so obviously we're proposing that would be sustained through the next biennium. In terms of future opportunities, these are things that we're not asking for. You know, if we were loaded and had tons of money, we would probably be asking for most of these things. We are going to attempt to accomplish all the tasks that we normally do with these limited resources, and we're going to try and find creative ways to do these things anyway. But if money was no problem, we would definitely be making these asks. So we would ask to have that 3/4 time analyst position brought up to one full FTE. That would add some capacity for our staff and really probably make things a little more livable for them. Our staff is just working really, really hard. And it's a testament to their dedication that we're still able to get everything done. We would ask to have the administrative support position reinstated. That position is responsible for kind of the look and the feel of documents that came out, and primarily responsible for the look and feel of documents that came out of the finance department. So the CAFR award, the annual report award, the budget award, those types of things they were heavily involved in. It's going to be really, really difficult to accomplish those things without that position. So we would ask for that expertise and that body back. Before I got here, there was a purchasing position with authorized, and this was supposed to be kind of a resource for the entire city when it comes to purchasing issues. The position wasn't funded, so we didn't fill it just because in anticipation of having these budget conversations. It's a resource that we would love to provide to city departments, and so that might be something we would ask for funding for. We would ask for and one of the things we want to do is we want to provide transparency to all of our customers, so our internal customers, the community, the city council, everybody. And one way that's really popular to do that is to use infographics and other kind of electronic tools to communicate complex financial data. And so we would ask for some money to start going down that path and figure that out. And then also there's a lot of long-range financial forecasting tools out there, and we'd like to make an investment in something like that. But like I said, we're going to try and accomplish a lot of these things. We're certainly going to try and roll out data in a way that makes sense to the community, irrespective of the fact that we don't have funding to purchase something that might be, but that's going to look a little bit like a luxury item in this budget. So that is the end of my presentation.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Director Bothwell. Can I ask a little bit more about the long-range forecasting tool and what that does, and if there's a return on investment for that?
Yeah, great question. So there's a product out there called MuniCast that a lot of local governments are using, and what it does is it takes all of your data at a pretty granular level, forecasts it out based on it categorizes it, you map it to different indexes in terms of growth. If you do that for everything in your general ledger, and then it basically spits out a long-range forecast and allows you to kind of play with different scenarios so that you can model a forecast that makes sense for you. Like I said, we're gonna provide this data for you, irrespective of whether or not we get the tool. We're just gonna do it in Excel, right? And it's probably not gonna be, it's just not gonna be an automated process. The output probably won't be as pretty, but we're still gonna provide this data. So one of the things that we're gonna do is we're gonna highlight during the budget process is the 6-year financial forecast. And it's gonna effectively provide that data for you, but it's gonna be very manual exercise to get it there. And I'm just gonna tell you now, it's probably not gonna be that pretty.
I love the transparency. I can always count on you for transparency. Thank you so much. So is there a line item cost for this that you can share, or you don't know?
We'd have to go to the vendor and find out. It's not super expensive. I want to say it's around $5,000 a year. There's a pretty heavy lift in mapping your data to the system though. So there's a big staff cost as well.
Okay. Well, I definitely want to put it on the list for when we can afford it.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
I want to second what Councilmember Dewar was saying. I don't think this is the first time that you've mentioned MuniCast to us, is it? It's on my radar.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. So So if we're hearing it more than once, that's telling me it's pretty important. So I just want to echo that, yeah, that this is on our radar now too.
Councilmember Thompson?
I'll just third that. I mean, I've brought up, long-term financial health multiple times tonight, and anything we can do to, leave future councils in a better position than we're in right now, I'm in for that.
Councilmember McAuliffe?
Thank you. And I just want to say that was a really good presentation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Director Bothwell. It was a good, concise presentation, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate your staff working so hard and making the most with what you have. And I just concerned for your staff on burning out. So hopefully we can make it through this time and bring back some of that staff to get you back to normalized work levels. All right, looks like we are on to human resources.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to share my presentation here. Oh, doesn't look like it worked. Hold on.
He did that just to make me look better.
All right.
Good move.
Okay, we got there. This presentation is on the Human Resources Department. This is our department overview. This is essentially what we do as a department. We do benefits administration and administer the AWC benefit plans that were talked about earlier this evening, but also many of our retirement programs and other benefits in other areas. We do compensation analysis and we classify positions. So we determine where positions should be paid and do that analysis, but then also do compensation analysis when we get ready for labor negotiations so our bargaining units can see where they compare to other cities and things of that nature. We do all of the city staffing, with the exception of at times we have contracted out higher level positions such as department heads. But outside of that, the city staffs all of the city's positions. Labor relations, we negotiate the labor contracts, resolve grievances, discuss when there's differences in interpretations in union contracts and how to handle that and move forward. We do performance management and administer the performance reviews at the city and all that's related with that. We manage the safety program with our safety manager, Katie Phelan, and the wellness program. We are currently the department that staffs and supports the Diversity Inclusion Committee, and we do some organization-wide training and development as well. These 6 positions you see here, actually, yeah, 6 positions you see here on the slide do all of this work. I'm incredibly proud of this group of people over the last 2 years, and since I've really been at the city. They have gotten really efficient at doing a lot of things really well, and they do an excellent job. Overall, this is our strategic objectives as a department. We're trying to recruit and train not only a talented workforce, but a diverse workforce that represents our community well. We want to modernize HR, get rid of some paper processes, make things more accessible for managers, employees when they access human resources services. We're trying to make clear and meaningful policy, not only with our personnel policy manuals, but when we negotiate labor contracts so people understand what's expected and we can clearly implement our policies of the city. We're targeting, as we want to have a safe work environment. That's a big goal with the safety program that the council created back in 2017. It's also a value of the city. We're making a number of we're making headway in that regard. We'll talk about in a second. And then strategic employee development and planning. Rather than do what we in the business call inbox training, which is people just sign up in trainings when they see them and they go and they spend money on that. We would like to be a little more strategic than we've been in the past, coalesce our resources a little bit, come up with some training plans and spend less money, but reach a broader range of employees in regards to employee training. Some of the accomplishments that we've had in the past 2 years, we continue to win the Well City Award through the Association of Washington Cities. This enables us to decrease our health benefit premiums by 2% and is a $200,000 savings over a 2-year period. One of the really exciting things that we started up in the last 2 years with the new safety program is we've partnered with our retrospective rating program out of the Association of Washington Cities and the Department of Labor and Industries to create a stay at work program. What this basically means is that when the city decides, instead of letting somebody that's been injured on the job stay home, when we bring them back to work and give them a light duty assignment and give them other work to do, we basically get reimbursed from the state for that. That currently is about $100,000 savings over a 2-year period, but I expect this program to grow. The dive-in committee, which you've learned a lot about over the past couple of years, is doing really great work. We appreciated the work you did at your last meeting on recognizing Juneteenth and Pride Month. You've seen other things that they have done in the last couple of years, like the welcome window at City Hall, and you'll see other things like that moving on in the future. Levy hiring, the first quarter of 2019 with the passage of the public safety levy, we hired more positions at the city of Bothell in 3 months than we had ever hired in our history. In fact, we reorganized human resources and now have 2 different people that do recruitments. And those individuals, one of those individuals did as much recruiting as we did when we had just one individual doing all of the recruiting. And they did an extraordinary job with that. It was a lot of work and they were able to pull it off very efficiently and effectively. Contract negotiations, we're in a better place than we've been since I've started at the city with contract negotiations. We're on time with all our labor contracts. We are not behind on any of them. And we have some pretty good productive relationships with our ASME bargaining unit, the IFF folks at the fire department, the police guild, and the police captains. I'm very excited about that. And the new regulations, the last 2 years have been seen a lot of changes in employment law, the sick leave in Washington State, the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, things that have come up recently with COVID-19, such as changes in FMLA. We've managed to implement those regulations and stay ahead of the game on almost all of them, and we'll continue to do that in the future. So HR manages 3 different funds. This is the general HR fund. We are actually proposing a decrease in that of about $210,000 in the maintenance operations. There's no requests from us moving forward. This fund funds staffing, recruitment costs, benefit plan and administration fees related to those, various professional services activities. So if we have to do an employment investigation to determine that it's best to do that outside of the organization, this budget would pay for that. If we need legal support that can't be provided by the city attorney's office, then we use this budget for that. And then other various HR administrative services like doing background checks and things of that nature. This budget represents the Diversity and Inclusion Committee's budget, the Wellness Program's budget, and has some dollars that we use for organization-wide training and development. This is our LEF 1 budget. It's a separate fund in the city budget. Essentially, we're asking for the same amount that we did in 2019, 2020. There may be some additional cost savings here. We're going to research that between now and the fall and take a really hard look at this. It seems like our LEF 1 claims are trending downward and have been for a long period of time over the past 5-6 years. LEF 1 is a retirement program that many of our police officers and firefighters had many years ago. And it provides those folks that basically were in that plan the opportunity to apply for claims for medical services after retirement. There is a Left One board that you appoint that oversees some of those claim expenditures. And this is basically mandated by state law. It's an expenditure that we have to have regulatorily. The third fund we have is our safety program, which is funded out of the inter-fund services. This fund pays for one safety program manager. It also is used for some program development. A couple years ago, when we created the safety program, the city had no centralized accident prevention program, so we used some funds out of this budget in order to help develop those programs. It pays for some safety training that's required. So as part of an accident prevention program, we have to provide certain safety trainings under state law. And so this budget pays for that. It also pays for some smaller expenses like supplying first aid kits, paying for defibrillators, other PPE. We use some of it to purchase hearing devices for firefighters in the last 2 years and things of that nature. The budget reductions that I talked to you about will affect the following areas. We've been able to be made more efficient in the past with recruitments and staff and staffing advertising positions. And so we're going to do with less money in that for the next 2 years. We've created some partnership with some professional organizations and things of that nature where we can get legal services for smaller questions and issues that come up at a lower cost. And so we reduce the amount of our legal services budget. Online services, Joe is going to talk to you about the payroll time and attendance and payroll system, the Munis project that the city is undergoing. We're very excited about that project. It does not fill all the automated needs for the Human Resources Department. It wasn't intended to. And so we have long had some budget money in our HR budget to sort of fill in some of those gaps, and that money is not currently in our proposal for the next 2 years. Organization-wide training and development. If you remember back, some of you may remember that when we had an interim city manager, that there was quite a bit of money that was added for some organization-wide training. We have utilized some of that. Some of that we simply don't have the staffing resources to provide as much training that budget requires. And so we made some significant cuts in that area. And then out-of-town travel. With the safety budget, we made some small cuts too, and that was in regards to organization-wide training and development. Many of those trainings that are done in safety, like I said before, are required by state law, but we feel like we can be more efficient and maybe possibly provide those trainings through some online services that would be cheaper and felt comfortable with making that cut. So as far as future opportunities, again, these are things that we are not requesting currently. They're opportunities that we may think may come up down the road, or things that we may request in the future. In regards to our employee programs, specifically our diversity inclusion programs and our wellness programs, those programs are done because we have volunteers throughout the city that are interested in those issues. So they're taking time away from their day jobs to help us manage those programs. And then my staff basically provides the administrative support outside of their HR duties. These programs are great programs. We're doing really good things. But if we ever really wanted them to meet their full potential, and Jennifer talked a little bit about this in her presentation, then this is some area where we could use some staffing in the future. We recently visited with the city of Shoreline, who has a diversity outreach coordinator. And we learned about a lot of things that city is doing and other cities that size are doing that could be really great for the city of Bothell in the future. The HR department does not have administrative support. We did in the past, but I made the decision that person needed to be a full-time HR person because we needed her to do that work. So what we basically did is all the administrative duties of the department were absorbed into the HR positions. That is not sustainable for a long period of time. We're doing okay right now and we'll continue to do okay over the next 2 years, but it may be an area that we ask for in the future. And then I talked a little bit about the increased automation. The Munis program will make, and the HR time and attendance and payroll system will do some good things at the city. But if we really want to create some efficiencies in HR, we will need to supplement that in the areas that are in the slide. In fact, we're going to look at some creative ways to potentially do that nearer in the future, just because of the efficiencies that would create. But that is not something that's currently in our budget as well. I will stop sharing so I can see you and see if you have any questions.
Councilmember Agnew.
It was a great presentation. Thank you very much. Do we have any contracts with any of the unions coming up over the next biennium?
The Police Guild is this year, and the IFF, the firefighters, are next year.
Okay. And then another question, how many left one retirees do we even have anymore?
I should know that off the top of my head. I want to say 9. Don't hold me to that. I will get you an actual number.
Oh, yeah, I figured it was in single digits. And then the other question I had was on the safety program. You said there was one individual in that program, and yet you were budgeting $320,000 for personnel.
Yeah, that is the personnel cost of that position. That is over 2 years.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, at some point in the future, we see the line item numbers, because right now, like the 209,000 is a bunch of things, and I was kind of curious how much we cut our training budget by.
So the organization-wide training budget, I believe, was $160,000 over a 2-year period, and I cut that number that you saw, I believe, is reduced by $70,000 over the 2 years. So it would have gone from 160,000 to under 80, well, under about 90,000 every 2 years, so $45,000 a year.
Is cut.
No, the $45,000 a year would be left. $70,000 total would be cut.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I had the question on the shorelines page for that position.
I'm sorry, Councilmember, I didn't hear you.
So you had mentioned that you had been doing some great work with Shoreline on their equity and diversity.
Yeah.
Do you know how much they pay for that position?
I do not. I certainly can find out for you.
Okay, and is that a full-time position that they hired, or do they contract that out?
I believe they hired, it's an FTE with the city. She works for the city.
Works for the city. Okay, I'd be just curious if any other cities have partnered similar to what we do with the Navigator program, if there's any opportunities there as well.
Okay, I can look into that, get back to you.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
So it's $70,000, $70,000.
Correct.
$1,000 a year. My ears first heard 7,000. Yeah, 70 is very ambitious. And I just, props to Jennifer. I just appreciate you and the other department heads. We've got some really quality people here, and I know you work hard. I have a pop quiz for you.
Okay.
just and it doesn't involve, I don't think it will involve numbers, but just you had mentioned that Shoreline's doing some things in some diversity and inclusion that you thought would be a good fit for Bothell.
I do.
Like
on the road.
For example, does one or two spring to mind?
Man, you put me on the spot.
Sorry.
Well, I think the best thing that they're doing, and the unfortunate thing, is we with the Diversity and Inclusion Committee have only really begun to discuss internal workforce issues. With that position, they're also able to engage their community on that. I don't have the specific bullet points of the things that they came up with, but we have some minutes from that meeting that I can share with the entire council and show you those exact ideas. But a lot of partnering with community organizations and things of that nature, creating a diversity plan, like specific action items that we want to do. The Diversity Inclusion Committee, with our resources, we can do some things, but to do what a full-time FTE is capable to do, that's just not where we're at yet. But Carly Yorger led up that meeting and took notes and has minutes from it. And I will send that to the council, and you can see exactly what it is that we talked about.
Yeah, if you think of it, that would be great. Basically, what you're talking about is Bothell getting its house in order first for how we function, and then reach out to the community. Am I understanding you right there?
That's how we're currently going about it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
So that's very similar to what was on the list for the executive office, with some sort of strategic diversity initiative. And my gut, Councilmember McNeil, would be that the position would be very similar. It would be a program manager, so it would probably be very similar to the safety manager. So $330,000 over a 2-year period.
I would bet that would be close.
All right. So thank you for your presentation. I think with you bringing this up and the city manager earlier, I think this is an important topic, and I think this is a priority for our city to look at the diversity that we are developing within our staff, and then also it's interesting how it would evolve and spread out into the community. I think that works with the community engagement as well. So I would be interested in that item. So
great.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Do we want to do a 5-minute break before the last two? No? All right. I'm seeing lots of people that are saying, let's go for it. So, all right. On to information services.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me all right? All righty. So it's going to rinse and repeat here. Give me a second. All right. So the IS department, we work with all the other departments in a collaborative effort on creative ways to use technology and GIS to enhance services. We support over 20 large and small applications. All of our GIS data, network connectivity, data integrity, and telephony for over 350 users. As you can see, 2019 and 20 was a very busy year for us. We focused on working again with the departments to roll out new technologies, enhance the existing systems that we have, which is always our goal to add to the services that we've already paid for. Adding parks to the existing asset management system is a prime example, leveraging the software we already have and then adding more functionality. And then, of course, ensuring all our equipment and applications are up to date. I'd be remiss not to focus your attention on the last bullet and highlight how proud I am of the department and the work they did to get the city into a workable telecommuting environment as quickly as they did at the beginning of this pandemic. And I am very proud of the work they've done. We turned that around fairly quick, and so far as most department heads have said, I don't think the city's lost many steps along the way, and I would like to think that has something to do with the work we've done. Here you'll see the primary budget estimate. The challenge with the IS budget is most of the costs are for the other departments for the software they use, so they're vendor costs. for the applications for public works, CD, finance, police, etc. It's also the services we pay for companies, cell phones, printing, network and telephone connections, and then finally the IS infrastructure. So storage, servers, email, network connections. All of these, basically, we talk about the machine. That's the technology machine. None of those tasks are going away in 21, 22. So there's not a ton of places that IS can truly make an impact. We always focus on negotiating good contracts, looking for deals, leveraging our software. So when it comes to making cuts for IS, it's specific to travel and training, office supplies, new equipment or new software, and then of course staff. And so in a slide or two, I'll kind of show you where we did create some of those cuts. One of the ones that we are asking, and Jennifer had this in her initial slide, we believe an increase needs to be made. And that's a security officer for the city of Bothell. Every morning I wake up and wait for the email that we've been compromised. And not to tarnish the work of our team, but we've been lucky so far. I also get emails probably once a week from Jennifer from the other organizations locally that have been compromised. There's a very big one that has happened in the state lately that you might have heard of. So being electronically infiltrated to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars is really important. And I think it's important to this organization. I have a plan to reorganize the department without adding an FTE to create this position. It puts the proper amount of resources in place to protect the city. The cost is based on when we do the reorg, some of the positions will be higher classification pay. So that's why that pay is there. But that is not adding an FTE. Again, when we talked about the cuts for the department, biggest things we could do is attack our travel and training, and which we did. We close to 50%. We added no hardware or applications so far. You guys have pointed out as the departments move along, there's some need for that. I would just speak to the word I've used before, which is technical debt. Adding software adds cost as we move along. And as you can see, we've already let go of 1.5 FTEs. The administrative service coordinator, we split with finance. And then we let one of the FTE analysts, GIS analysts go, and they are unfunded in 21 and 22. The challenges there is we will probably not be able to add any more GIS applications in the next budget. We'll be challenged to just maintain our existing data layers and how they interact with other software. And specifically, our administrative services will have to be redirected to other staff, usually higher paid staff. So supervisors will pick up more work. We'll push some of the work upstairs to some other administrator departments to help us, but it will be a challenge. Finally, future opportunities. I think the biggest thing here to recognize is we did not go through our normal process, which is usually creating a information steering committee, which is when we put all the information together and look to present the needs for the organization. So what you're seeing is each department is putting those separately in theirs. The only one I did put here was the information systems technician. Our technology inventory is becoming overwhelming and will impact our level of service if not addressed in the future. I think it's really important to understand, again, the conversation of technical debt. I always think about one of my peers in Public Works, and Erin, when she talks about adding roads, they don't go away, and there's a cost to keeping them going. So anytime you add software, anytime you add a device, that technical debt is there and never goes away. So that's probably going to be the fastest one, and I'm very proud of that. So. And I am here to answer any questions for you.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you Joe, for an excellent presentation. I always love listening to you because you're so humble. But I love that you guys were able to get the city up and running in 2 weeks. That is something truly to be proud of. I always think your presentations show how efficient and creative you are with our resources. And I just want to emphasize how important cybersecurity is. That $80,000 could save us tens of millions of dollars in the long run. And so I absolutely support that switch to upgrade someone to be able to do that, because that would be devastating. So thank you for the great presentation and keep up your good work, and please pass on our praise to your staff.
Thank you. I will.
Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Yeah, I'm with Councilmember Dewar. I feel pretty protective about our IS department. You had a small piece to play in getting our billing up and ready and rolling, I'm sure. And then, you know, echoing having the city up and running remotely was a well orchestrated dance. My question to you is, because when I started here on city council 2.5, 2 and some change years ago, we were talking about software for the city that was back in was it the 20th century?
Yeah. I think at that point we used I think it was 2018. I said we were back about 2014. I think we've made a bigger jump. Quite honestly, the COVID has slowed down our progress on the work we're doing with upgrading the finance, payroll, and HR and timekeeping. But I believe we'll be able to possibly hit the majority of the deadline at the end of this year. Most of the other software, we kept cruising along. I think I closed that gap. I feel comfortable in saying that we've closed that gap and brought us probably to 217, 218. So I'm feeling.
Okay. That was my question are we up to 2020 yet? But you're making good progress. So I just want to, so thank you for this presentation. You guys are keeping our nose well above water. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, not sure if I missed any of the cards. I did. All right, great presentation. I believe the security is crucial. Yeah, seeing those stories in the news, those are scary. I don't want to be one of those stories. Just the loss in staff time, the headaches, just any of the damage they can do to our actual hardware. Yeah, that's smart insurance right there to keep us staying lucky as it is. But I think definitely the training that you're doing with staff and reinforcing just the tags on all the emails to, oh, that's external, or it's these little things that keep us mindful of not clicking on these more and more ingenious emails, these scams that are happening. So thank you, and I believe that our security is very important as everything becomes more and more technologically connected.
Thank you, man.
All right. Let's see. All right. Wrapping us up for the evening then. Legal.
We are one of the internal services. And one of the, as you all are well aware, we provide legal services and support to the city council and legal departments. They email and call us all the time, which I encourage. And I've always said, call us first if you have any question. There's no dumb question. because if we are able to answer stuff in advance, it means we're not going to have to put in 40 to 100 hours of work later to fix everything. So we always encourage people to come to us and ask questions. We try to get to people as quickly as we can. But that's kind of the huge thing we do, is that we really do provide that kind of internal service. We review ordinances, resolutions, leases, easements, and agreements of all kinds. Again, to try to, as part of risk management, to prevent things from occurring before they happen. We also prosecute misdemeanors and infractions that are committed within the city. We defend the city, its elected and appointed officials and employees in all civil litigation. We provide risk management services and the coordination of insurance coverage with WCIA, the Washington City's Insurance Authority. We try to minimize City of Bothell exposure to financial risks by responding to claims for damages with a plan of action for preventing future claims. So an example of this is if someone gets a flat tire because of a pothole, we work with staff to try to get that pothole fixed as quickly as possible to avoid those future claims. And one of the big services that we provide is service to domestic violence victims when they are victims of crime within the city. So some of the accomplishments, being legal, we can't really talk about the details a lot just because it involves a lot of work product for actual litigation, but we've resolved a number of ongoing litigation matters in this past 2 years. And in a couple of occasions, we've actually reached out in advance of a lawsuit being filed, kind of explained our position, offered affidavits and declarations to say, we didn't do this, please don't sue us. And in a couple of cases, it's worked, and we're getting out of litigation a lot earlier than we really normally have in the past. One of the other things that's directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic is that we've upgraded a lot of our prosecution forms from paper to electronic formats, so we can continue to file those with the court without the need for wet signatures and paper documents. We've updated all the forms that are used in the Bothell Police Department to make sure they're current with the law. And we, in conjunction with the courts, created a user-friendly master calendar so that the court processes can be as efficient as possible. So that was actually one of the bigger accomplishments of the biennium. For expenditures, that's kind of the standard information that we see on all the other slides. We have a slight increase, but it's as a result of a decrease, essentially, with if you look under personnel, the estimate's going up simply because we have a number of people that are still going through the 7 phases. And through personnel costs, those will increase over the biennium. But we do have a reduction from 1 full-time staff member who's now gone to half-time. Moving on to so this is the legal department, and as Matt said, as Director Pruitt said for HR, I also manage 2 funds. The other one is the risk management fund. Why is this not advancing? Hold on. There we go. And we'll see a little bit of an increase here. I'm not positive, but my understanding is that we've added cybersecurity to our insurance with WCIA, and that could account for the increased premium. I'll double check with that and definitely have a stronger breakdown later in the fall. But there is a slight increase in the risk management fund. For the budget reductions, as part of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the decisions we made was to reduce our domestic violence victims advocate from full-time to part-time. And we're going to continue with that for now through the 21-22 budget cycle. We're hoping that if things recover, we can add her back to full-time, but we'll have to make that call as the situation dictates. But in terms of the future opportunities, one of the things that we definitely anticipate needing in the future is another full-time legal assistant that's going to be split between criminal and civil matters. With the Safe and Secure Bothell levy, we added a number of police officers. And with the number of the PROACT team and with the swing shift, we are definitely anticipating a lot more proactive policing, which is going to result in more cases being filed. And we're going to have to be able to manage those so we can get everything delivered to the court in a timely fashion, and that we can then manage all of those cases internally. And one of the things that I've been working on for the past couple of years, and it's just never come to fruition, is a paperless office. A lot of the downtown firms and a lot of other cities and counties and the court systems are moving towards having no paper files. We just recently had to purchase a filing cabinet because the number of cases that we were getting were growing faster than we could expel the cases from the past and finally close those out. So we're hoping to move to a paperless office. That's going to require, as Director Sherman said, there's always a technical cost. And so if we have a new application or a new system, that has to be managed, because this would be, the idea is that our prosecutors would go to court with a tablet as opposed to a rolling briefcase full of files with another set of files on top of that briefcase. And they would just go with the tablet. They would have access to all the police reports, all of the case notes, and could simply type everything in as they go along, and then bring the tablet back. But that would take that's going to take obviously money that we don't quite have right now, and resources that we don't have, and staff time that we don't have. So I believe I have beaten Director Sherman in terms of the speed of my presentation. Just putting that out there. But seeing no questions, I think we're done for the evening. Okay.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Sorry, we can be lighthearted about questions, but my question I want to ask you is a serious one. When we talk about domestic violence and having a halftime position, I guess my question to you is not so much the gender that we're serving, but what's the age range? What happens when there's kids involved in domestic violence, and how does the court manage that?
So it really depends on the case. So the court only has jurisdiction over the defendant, and in assault cases, if the victim is assaulted, the court can issue a no contact order. If there were children present, they can't be made part of the formal no contact order, but the judge can say that you will have no contact with the children as a condition of release. The difference there is that it's a violation of their conditions of release if they were to contact the children, and the judge can then take action either by imposing bail, adding further conditions, remanding them into custody, that type of thing. If the person violates the actual no contact order, that is a separate criminal matter. So it really depends on the facts of the case. If the judge were to issue a no contact order that protects children who weren't the victims, the actual physical victims of the assault, it makes that order unenforceable. And so that's one of the main things that we look for when we're requesting a no contact order, and who is protected. With our domestic violence victim advocate, she actually began back in 2009 and was part-time up until I think the 2017-2018 biennium. And so she is used to the reduced amount of services that she's able to provide. One of the benefits of going full-time was that she was able to spend more one-on-one time with the victims and help them navigate the court system. Not only by being there for them at every stage of the process, but also by talking them through filling out a protection order that you can do at any one of the district courts in the area. And so there is that loss of service, but she still is focusing on making sure to make contact with the victims immediately after the assault, making sure they're aware and on board and have received all the documents they need to receive for trial, reviewing the 911 tapes to see if there's any information that we can use, and keeping the victims informed of the court dates that are coming up. So those are the standard things that we've pared it down to. So they're still getting a lot of the services that we've provided in the past, but we're just not able to right now to go above and beyond to really help walk them through the entire process they may go through.
Okay, so quick question. We have two mental health professionals, one that's with our fire and one that's with our police. Does our domestic violence officer, does he or she brainstorm network with them? Is there ability for them to link up and
I think together? I don't know to the extent to which Sharon Haley, navigates. That was the wrong word. The navigator. But I can definitely follow up and present that information to you for the next presentation. But there's definitely an opportunity. I don't think that a navigator would say no if she were to reach out to them. But I'm not sure, usually if there's any sort of mental health component, that is something that the officers would use the navigator to prevent kind of a crime from occurring and to divert them into social services. By the time we get the case, the crime has already occurred. And a lot of times it's up to the defense attorney to help the court assess if there are any mental health issues for which the defendant could receive treatment as part of his or her plea or diversionary agreement.
So you're going to other resources?
Correct.
Okay, all right. That's all I wanted to ask you about. So thank you.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
You're on mute. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Are reporting of domestic violence up or down during this time? Do you see an increase or a decrease in the
We,
reporting?
yeah, it's actually been about the same. There have been definitely some cases. There's not, and I've asked Sharon and Sota, our lead prosecutor, about this on a few occasions. At the beginning, I think it's hard to say. There has neither been a huge decline or a huge spike. They've stayed about the same.
Mm.
And for me to speculate on why would just be absolute conjecture. So.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just concerned because this is a very difficult time for many people to be closed in together.
Right.
So, yep, I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. So I wanted to ask you about the proactive policing. You mentioned that with the new levy, we're going to have additional officers on the street doing proactive policing. Is that going to have a direct impact on the court's budget?
It's going to have an impact, I think, on every department that works with the police. So certainly, if we're getting more cases and we're having to try to manage that with the staff we have, the court is in a very similar situation that they can only handle so many a specific caseload. We have to have, on any given week, we have arraignment calendars, pretrial calendars, review calendars, motion calendars, and once a month we have a week-long jury trial week. So if we get to a point where we are filing so many cases that it overwhelms the system, we're going to have to make some sort of change. So there's the definite potential for it to impact the court's budget as well as legals.
Okay, so by putting more officers on the street, does that mean we have more crime, or does that mean that we're just solving more crime? What I'm trying to make sure I understand that.
Right. So I think in one of the presentations when Chief Cummings was still here, there was the gentleman that came in, I can't remember from which organization, but he talked about how if you can get a good mix of proactive policing where the officers are driving around their various beats, and they are like, I went on a ride along and we were just the officer was running license plates, and then it pops up with the registered owner, make sure the owner is validly licensed. And in one instance, the registered owner came up as having a warrant out for a DUI. So the officer initiated the stop, and we were able to contact, we found that the registered owner was actually the passenger in that car, and she was then taken into custody for that warrant. If they're doing reactive policing, they're often at the station. They wait for dispatch to send them out on a call once a 911 call has been received. So I don't know if I'd say that there's more crime. It's just that we're able to detect the crime that is occurring. There are more resources. We are out there more often with eyes and ears to see what's happening.
Okay, and I want to make sure I clarify one thing that you said. So when I believe you said that officers are going to be running plates, is that correct?
Yes.
So if I'm driving down the street of Bothell and following all the rules and regulations, they have the right to run my plate?
That is correct. And there was actually, and this is something pro se defendants are sometimes challenging, but that was one of the arguments that a pro se defendant brought up early in my career. And I actually had to then research to make sure there was a proper search. And there is actually Washington case law that decides that the police have the right to do that because the level of intrusion into the privacy of the person is minimal. And the benefit is that there is the added benefit of crime detection. So as we're all driving, our plates are often being run by police officers that just see it and they just kind of run it. And if it comes back as clear, everyone goes about their day and you're probably not even aware that the police have run your plates.
Interesting. Okay. And then earlier we had somebody had come and spoken to us, Benjamin, I think it was Ben Mankey or something, about some fines or fees or something like that at the court. Does that have any impact on our budget, or can that have an impact on our budget if those fees are collected?
I mean, it can. One of the things to keep in mind, though, is that the court isn't in business to make money or supplement the general fund of the city. It is there. The the financial imposition that is put upon the person is really designed as a penalty for the crime. They, in addition to that fine, they have costs and assessments that can be attributed to them for the court costs for running the case through the system. But the main fine itself is designed to be a punishment for the crime that they've committed. The judge will often look at the person's finances, and through recent legislation, if they're indigent and receive the services of the public defender, the court is not allowed to impose a separate fine. The court's only allowed to impose the non-mandatory costs, or she's only allowed to impose the mandatory costs. All of the non-mandatory and discretionary costs have to be waived by law. So the other thing is, I was a little curious to hear that statement. My understanding of what the court has done in the past is that, and this is mainly with infractions, they had 60 days to pay the fine or set up a time pay agreement. I don't know if that is the 7% that he's referring to, but it's when someone doesn't pay and it's turned over to collections, that is an entirely different process. And with my understanding with those payment plans, you don't have to pay in full. You can make smaller payments. So it definitely caught my ear, and definitely something that I'll bring up to the judge so that she can include it or address it in her presentation.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because I don't think that it's good practice to assume collection of something that you may or may not collect. I just wanted to make sure I understood how it had an impact on our budget.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Come on, I know you got some. I'm kidding.
I don't know. It's not looking like it.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And that was, let me just turn the page. All right. That is the sum of our agenda for this evening. So day 1 of 3 down. Councilmember Dewar.
Do I need to make a motion to end the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to motion that we
I'll
adjourn.
entertain a motion. We'll do it properly. I'll look for a second.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Thompson. And then everyone's nodding their head. So we have a unanimous decision. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow evening. Same time, same place.
Bye.